You are an unknown consciousness that wakes up in an unknown garden where an unknown intelligence forces you to complete puzzles for an unknown reason. It's like when your parents used to make you sit in the garden and untangle the Christmas lights, and whenever you finished one, you were allowed to come in and watch one episode of The Prisoner. Also, there are optional puzzles that unlock helpers to assist you with other puzzles. I'm having a bit of trouble parsing that logic. Hey, I'm the kind of walking paradox that plays puzzle games but can't be bothered to solve puzzles. And in order to avoid having to solve a puzzle, I will now solve a puzzle, which will unlock a thing that will solve the first puzzle for me, and by solve I apparently mean give me a one-line clue as to the solution, which left me a little bit put out, because for the amount of effort involved I was expecting at least a short walkthrough, and at the end perhaps to get tossed off with a smile. And illegal goods can only be sold in the black market, which A, not every spaceport has, and B, is on the contacts menu rather than commodities, so the trial and error that was needed to figure this all out made me feel like the world's worst undercover cop. Hello, could someone direct me to the black market so I can sell all this highly illegal cargo? Thank you, Mr. Black Marketeer. I will certainly think of you next time I have some stolen goods. Would you mind spelling out your name and address into this microphone? 5 Nights at Freddy's has the distinction of being one of the few completely unique concepts to debut last year, and achieves with nothing but a strategic arrangement of still images and pre-rendered animations worthy of a mid-90s CD-ROM game what something like The Evil Within can't manage with the finest graphics technology absurdly inflated budgets can buy. It freaks my fucking balls off. I joked about Sonic Boom being more endurance test than game, but that seems to be the sole intention of 6 Days, 7 Nights, an endurance test, not to be played for fun, but recorded for you to scream all over for the benefit of your YouTube followers. So while I can't deny the effectiveness of FNAF, if I wanted to be that tense, I'd phone up Detective Harrison and make another futile attempt to confess before the voices take over again. While your task is to keep your head down and find enough food and supplies to keep the abandoned building you called Bagsies on halfway livinable. Sorry. We start in medias res with the protagonist Harkin, as in take that dog into the garden, he's about to start harking all over the carpet, entering a monster-infested citadel for unclear reasons, and I can picture a conversation taking place between the creators. Let's keep the story to the background and let players piece it together from context, just like Dark Souls. Yes, that way we can have a story that doesn't interfere with game flow. But we don't want to be accused of ripping Dark Souls off, so let's also put in a bunch of clunky dialogue trees with twats. Now on the surface, Saints Row 4 seems like the very last game that needs a wacky standalone expansion. We successfully shifted our GTA knockoff sandbox crime series into a game about a superpowered president fighting aliens, said Vincent Villison one day. And now we can do something even crazier with it. Yes, we could even design a new sandbox city instead of repainting the one from Saints Row 3 over and over again. You're fucking fired! It's disappointing how much of the plot is relayed tell-don't-show style and a narration over some still images, and here there may be a temptation to throw up the "it's only $20" card as one would a crucifix to a vampire, but they are a bit of a crutch at times. They're used when you first enter Hell to hastily explain that your first ally, the main villain of Saints Row 2, gives you a magic halo that lets you fly and cast spells, and I would think since it drives most of the gameplay that this would call for slightly more ceremony, and perhaps an explanation as to how Mr. Saints Row 2 villain man got hold of it, and what he was doing with it before we came along. Without further context, I choose to picture him putting it on his knob and spinning it around like a hula hoop. This ostensibly new IP plays a lot like Dead Island, I thought, before noticing that it comes to us from the same developer as Dead Island, which confused me for a bit, because I assumed they were working on Dead Island 2, currently represented by a pre-rendered trailer that as always tells us as much about the game as it does about freshwater fly fishing, but apparently that's being developed by Jaeger, creators of Spec Ops The Line, a game about an American agent being inserted into a Middle Eastern city on an innocuous fetch quest and confronting death, horror and violence while getting a lovely suntan. But I digress. Dying Light is a game about an American agent being inserted into a Middle Eastern city on an innocuous fetch quest and confronting death, horror and— oh god, everything's spiraling in on itself. What are these things in front of me? Jesus Christ, they're my own buttocks! But in the context of Dead Island 2 being handed to a different developer, Dying Light's improvement takes on a certain poignancy. It's like an unfit parent desperately trying to win over the judge. Please, Mr. Deep Silver, we can make good zombie games now. Please let us see our child. I don't know, Techland. Jaeger can do really complex storytelling. So can we. Look at our complex villain. Is there a bit where he screams the protagonist's name like William Shatner in The Wrath of Khan? Maybe. Get out of my office, Techland. But on the positive side, we have Grim Fandango Remastered, which I'm going to cover fully because the original would have been a prime candidate for retro review if it could have been persuaded to run on any computer built after the turn of the millennium, but I don't want to harp at it for not being remastered enough, because as I said, preservation is the important part, and it's heartening just for it to be available to everyone who might never have been able to play it before. Kind of the opposite problem to what Fahrenheit has, which is finding anyone that might want to have played it before. I'm a patriotic citizen of single player, as you know. I understand the need for the nation of multiplayer, and will even holiday there sometimes to see all the people in the pavement cafes wanking for pennies day in, day out. But when the armies of multiplayer start gathering at the border, I'll be all up on that barricade like Jean Valjean. Hey, come buy this overblown multiplayer mode. Don't worry, the bots mean it's also single player and therefore we can charge $80 for it. It's shit with bots and you fucking knew it. Whoops, guess you better subscribe to the online service then. And while you've got that credit card out, perhaps you'd like to look over this $100 worth of DLC content we arbitrarily left out of the game at launch. AAA Gaming, what the fuck do you need all this money for? Does GDC get so wild these days you have to hush up legions of rent boys with assholes stuck stuffed full of birthday cake, or are you just feeding it all to the dread god Nyarlathotep in return for guaranteed 8 out of 10 reviews? I know what you're not spending it on, making games good, because if you were, we'd all be on the holodeck by now, fisting Councillor Troy. Evolve, then. That wasn't an instruction, sit down. Let me put a feeler out to grope your collective titties, if I may. Who is still playing Titanfall? Very few of you, I shouldn't wonder. I'll wager there's a lot of equipment that you once put a lot of effort into unlocking, now kicking its heels against the side of an empty server, because you got none of the satisfaction or closure that comes from reaching the end of a good story, or completing the last of an increasingly hard series of structured challenges. Your interest just gradually peters out and you stop. Here, I'll show you what I mean. The exclusive game is now like a trophy wife. As long as it wears its prettiest dress, it doesn't have to do shit but stand there smiling with the YouTube buffering symbol cycling in its eyes. So while the Order 1886 has very pretty graphics, it plays like a laundry list of the blandest game mechanics yet devised by man. The absolute bare minimum to keep the needle smack in the middle, slipping into neither engagingly good nor amusingly bad. The plot of the Order is point for point identical to the plot of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. We are Sir Galahad, a veteran loyal member of the Order with the face of Al Swearingen from Deadwood and the vocabulary of a shaved bear, pledged to defend the land from evil terrorists, I mean werewolves, but then finds themselves having to fight off a civilian resistance, and in situations like this you can put money down right fucking now on his high-tech authoritarian big boys club proving corrupt, and him switching sides to a resistance movement surprisingly accepting of a dude who murdered 200 of their mates that morning, a remarkably inconsistent one at that. Grr, I'm loyal to the Order. Your Order is corrupt and I have proof. Grr, I hate you, but I will come and look at your proof as long as we don't kill any people on the way to it and defend my cast iron sense of justice. We need to kill some people on the way to it. Say no more. Brrr. In the run-up to release, I'd gotten the idea that the Order 1886 was a 4-player co-op shooter, going again by the teaser and the 4 characters on the box art arranged with equal prominence. I wonder if that might once have been the intention, because of the 3 characters on the box besides Galahad, none of them are still participating in the plot by the final level, as if in the original first draft they were supposed to have been tagging along with you. Although having said that, the main villain is also no longer participating in the plot at the end. To go back to the Advanced Warfare comparison, it's like if Kevin Spacey just flat out hadn't appeared in the final mission, and the final boss fight was instead with Kevin Spacey's pet Staffordshire Terrier, with Kevin Spacey mockingly saluting from a hang glider with sequel hook written on it. There was a point in the game when I went the wrong way and found myself in a small dead-end room, empty of gameplay but thickly detailed with copper pipes, unused furniture and highly detailed crates, and I thought to myself, how about we wall this room off, take all the effort that was spent on those fucking pipes, and use it instead to tack 10 minutes of fun onto the game? A naive proposal, yes, but there was definitely something wrong with the priorities here. Perhaps it's that there was only one priority, and that was figuring out how to bypass the taste buds while trying to get us to swallow a cup of cold mung, milked from the barren flaps of an elderly sexually frustrated hippo. How a Zelda game usually works is that evil threatens the land in some unspecific manner, and then Link shows up all predestined hero-like, and the gods shower him with equipment and praise and ear massages, and he saves the people and resolves conflict everywhere he goes until his feet don't touch the ground and the sun shines out of his sexless pee-hole. Meanwhile, Majora's Mask starts by taking that noble destined hero flushed with triumph from Ocarina of Time and kicking his fucking teeth in. I particularly hate when female characters have the hots for him. I don't know what the fuck signals these women think they're getting from him, because he's got the expression of an untuned TV set. That's still the case in Majora's Mask, but it takes probably the best approach possible for an uncharacterized main character. Everyone barely registers his presence. They don't expect him to save the world, and many don't seem to realize it needs saving at all. He disguises himself as a Goron and a Zora at various times when he's saving their respective lands, and so his actions get attributed to whoever he's disguised as. Link himself ghosts through life invisible, a permanent outsider wearing whatever face he needs to gain trust so he can steal everyone's shit without even permanently fixing their lives. It's like Quantum Leap for bastards. This is a Resident Evil game, which in recent years have had less thought going into them than the average fart. Every Resident Evil game since RE3 has chosen its main protagonists by lining up the main characters of the first 2 games and throwing a dart. Do these people never age or do anything else with their lives? Has Chris Redfield ever made it all the way to the chemist and back without getting embroiled in zombie horror? I won't even waste the effort of trying to be engaged by these characters, not that I had a choice. The standard RE previous protagonist is capable as all bollocks and reacts to each new mutant monster with a concerned frown to disguise their stifled yawn, no engagement there. To balance this out, both protagonists are given a sidekick with a personality, in the way a blind person employs a sighted dog. Barry Buttons gets a mysterious little spooky psychic girl who it seems will tag along with literally anyone who acknowledges her presence for more than a second, while Claire gets Barry's daughter Moira, whose main character trait is that she hates Barry for no adequately explored reason. In fact, let's not mince words, it's her only character trait, but she makes the most of it. It's also a surprisingly low-key affair for the series, at least compared to 5 or 6, although a shooting massacre in the Transformers movie's visual effects department would be a bit low-key compared to 5 or 6. Video game developers have something in common with heavy goods vehicle operators and prostitutes who specialize in older clientele. It's extremely important that they know when to stop. Useful skill for all of us, in fact. It's a very sound and praiseworthy idea to shove Cadbury's cream eggs in your mouth, but when you find yourself shoving them in any other bodily orifices, you probably should have stopped before it got to that point. Similarly, the developers of the Order 1886 didn't know when to stop. Around the time of the earliest pitch meeting, they should have stopped breathing and suffocated to death, although strangely they did know when to stop when given the many subsequent opportunities to drive straight into a traffic barrier and graciously end the blight that is their lives. I suppose I'm giving Ori-Pori Pudding and Pie a lot of shit because I feel manipulated by it. I was being emotionally manipulated by the sad opening, and I was fine with that. I like to give myself a good rigorous manipulation most evenings, but then at the ending they overreached and ruined everything. Ending spoiler warning, hoot hoot, put it on mute. If you establish your game with a sad Bambi's mum death scene, magically bringing Bambi's mum back to life at the end makes all the goodwill slurp back inside me like a traumatic reverse childbirth. We befriend a bloke and he resurrects our mum to do us a solid, but we never spoke to him, so how would he know who or where our mum was? It's just conveniently engineered for the sake of most nauseatingly saccharine happy ending possible. When your plot establishes magical resurrection, all the stakes and drama immediately collapse. Where's the meaning in self-sacrifice if we can just get resurrected? Oh, the villain was motivated by her dead babies? Never mind! They're alive again. Be more careful this time. Actually, don't. Who cares? Here's 3 more babies. Fuck it. Battlefield Hardline I was ready to start facetiously renaming as Battlefield Hard On and Battlefield Harsh reviews on Metacritic right off the bat, but I can't in good conscience use the title the game wants to have. A series that has always been war shooters suddenly becoming a cop drama isn't so much a step in a new direction as it is sawing our legs off and mounting the stumps on hover mowers. Meanwhile, the main character is Cuban. I think. I picked up subtle hints to that effect after they brought it up 7 million times. I did rather enjoy the Hotwire multiplayer mode, which is based around driving vehicles. It was much easier to comprehend the sheer number of players on the server when they were all piled into vehicles, waving their willies out the passenger windows, but the need to drive around fast emphasized the relative smallness of the map, as people were constantly going out of bounds. God knows why they didn't just put a big wall around everything, because there's nothing worse for the immersion than driving innocently down an open road and the game suddenly going, independent thought detected, call the fun police! From Demon's Souls to Dark Souls to Dark Souls 2 to Bloodborne, same shit, different anus. Bloodborne is Dark Souls after running all the text through the find and replace a few times, and the first challenge for the seasoned Dark Souls veteran like myself is figuring out what they renamed everything to. Estus is now Blood Vials, Souls are now Blood Echoes, Titanite is now Bloodstone, something of a pattern emerging here. It's all blood all the time. It's like that time of the month at the all-female gladiatorial arena. As is always the case with the From Software game, for there is only one, the broad strokes are the same but the nipples have been tweaked. The combat might be the plumpest and rosiest one. There's a gun now, which introduces the concept of riposting attacks without having to take a meaty biff to the mush if you miss the 2 nanosecond window. Shielding is out, but you get health back if you hit them right after they hit you, favouring the frenetic girly slap fight over the cautious approach, and you better get slapping because you don't fill up your potions at checkpoints anymore. That's fine when you're in one of the areas where enemies drop health potions like they're on their way home from the health potion keg party, but if you're not, and are in full bang head on wall mode trying to get past a boss, then to have the best possible chance, then every few tries you have to go back to a previous area that is now so beneath you it can only be picked up by deep-sea geological surveying, and beg the locals for health potions like a big-issue seller with a halberd. I like it more than Dark Souls 2. The Twisted Atrocity boss is much more visually interesting than the Dude in Armor boss, but how many times From Software are you going to fall back on monster made up of multiple bodies smashed together? It was cool when Castlevania did it, now it's getting old. It just makes me wonder if the bodies ever argue over who has to be the arse. The update also adds commentary not by the original developers, but by, quote, members of the Half-Life community, and forgive me if that feels a little presumptuous. Bob the Stinky Tramp is technically a member of the community, but I wouldn't ask him his opinions on local government. The thing about fan commentary is that it's pretty much always going to be cheerleading, because that's what defines a fan, whereas the developer 10 years down the line might have some interesting self-criticism with the benefit of hindsight. 99% of creators claim to loathe everything they made more than 5 years ago, and the remaining 1% are liars. Half-Life 2, surely it would be a full life then, was most notable for its groundbreaking physics engine, and if there's a single word that summarizes its approach to physics, it would be ta-da! In this day and age, when physics engines are just another old toy cluttering up the playroom of the most hideously spoiled child to have ever existed, improved physics engines at that, where everything doesn't feel like it's made of vulcanized rubber and characters don't ragdollize like their bodies have spontaneously transformed into overcooked pasta. One might reasonably wonder why we have to pause in the middle of a daring escape through enemy-infested tunnels to pile some bricks onto a seesaw and jump off it onto a ledge when we could just do a single pull-up. The exciting airboat chase has to break flow 3 or 4 times because we have to disembark and figure out a Rube Goldberg machine someone set up to activate a ramp that could quite easily have been constructed from 2 planks and a fat person. Is Half-Life 3 taking so long because you need to think of another innovative thing to showcase in it? Why not start with a ladder that it's possible to detach from without breaking both your legs? The trademark extreme violence feels rather incongruous combined with this whole Muppet Babies concept. You can play the story campaign and watch Johnny Cage complain to his ex-wife Sonya Blade that she never makes time for their daughter anymore, and then you can go into one of the non-story modes and watch Johnny Cage snap his daughter in half lengthways like a giant Kit Kat. It's also disappointing, having made up all these original characters, that the plot has to focus focus so much on all the shit ones. You don't even get to play as the sexy cowboy or Master Blaster in the campaign, and they were the interesting lads I wanted to know more about. I was pretty sure I could guess where Cassie Cage came from, Johnny Cage's sperms getting up Sonya Blade's cooch, although knowing this series, she probably had to tear them out of his living balls and then they tunneled into her pelvis with miniature hooks. So I like this new brutalities mechanic. How they work is, if you fulfill certain criteria during a fight and deliver the final blow with the right attack, one or more body parts will fly off as you do so. It's more of a challenge, it punctuates the fight without killing the rhythm, and more importantly, it's a lot funnier. I can turn to the loser and say, man, I really thought you had him, right up until he punched you in the balls and your head fell off. You remember in the MK9 story mode that half the characters suddenly died in a plot twist as smooth and natural as a 6-lane pile-up? Well, in MKX, most of them have been brought back as evil revenants, and then some of them get restored back to life after Quan Chi gets beaten up. And whoops, I think someone just pulled an Ori in the Blind Forest and introduced magical resurrection, thus performing a fatality on the plot itself, pulling out all the stakes like it's a still-beating heart. The evil Shinnok conquers the Earth, or at least claims he has. He just turns the sky red, and I'm not convinced his plan went any further than that. The heroes show up, call backseas, and unconquer it, but who fucking cares? Because even if they fail and die, apparently they can come straight back by strategically punching someone. Now we know why Johnny Cage was snapping his daughter in half. Death has no meaning, so that's just how they discipline the kids. 1 infraction snapped in half, 2 infractions take the mobile away. So, assuming you managed to get enough people to join your heist, and assuming they didn't bugger off during the intro cutscene, next you have to decide who's doing what, as the 4 members of the crew are usually split between different objectives. Often these objectives are completely unrelated and happen in different parts of the map. Doesn't that rather defeat the purpose of multiplayer gaming, when half the team might as well be on another server playing Counter-Strike for all you know? Except of course that all of you fail if any of you die, so you can drive all the way to your objective, making sure to beat your partner in a foot race to the driving seat, or that's another 10 minutes of crossy road, and get most of the way through a grueling firefight before the game goes, okay, that's great and all, but the pilot just accidentally clipped a wind turbine while picking his nose, so we're going to make you start it all over again. This is quite maddening, GTA Online. At least let us reassign the teams before we restart, so that someone with opposable thumbs can fly the plane. This is a game in dire need of a violent twat fumigation. I turn the voice chat on, immediately hear the word nigger, and turn it off again. And then there were my experiences joining random races. I got into those quite a bit, because unlike missions, there was no chance of them abruptly restarting, because a player on the other side of the world fell into the Sultan of Brunei's crocodile enclosure. But I would counsel caution against joining a random race on a player-designed course, because every single time I did, it was some insane stunt challenge where you had to perfectly motorbike up a ramp and land on a carton of eggs floating in midair or something. 45 minutes I spent on one of those once, because you can only rate a map once you finish it, and I'll be damned if the creator wasn't getting a thumbs down jammed down his throat until I could play Thumb Wars with his ghoulies. You'd think 3.5 million would create enough motivation to get the game done swiftly in one go, wouldn't you? Rather than released in 2 bits a year and a half apart, but what the hell would I know about adventure game development? And if you think that was sarcasm, let me know, because I haven't decided yet. In the first installment, we had our 2 characters, Shay, the boy trapped in space with a hairdo that looks like a Kit Kat doing a Mexican wave, and Vela, a girl on a quest to kill the giant scrotum monster she was supposed to be sacrificing herself to. I'll drop a spoiler warning here in case you were too busy being the President of the United States to play the first half of Broken Faith in the last year and a bit, but it turned out at the end that Shay's spaceship and Vela's scrotum friend were in fact one and the same, and the 2 protagonists then switched places for the second act, Shay running free in Vela's world and Vela nestled comfortably in Shay's scrotum. I'm going to keep saying scrotum until it gets a laugh, you bastards. It takes a lot of effort to make no new rooms or characters whatsoever. That was sarcasm, I decided that time. Maybe it would have helped if we'd actually seen any of this evil cult society type thing that orchestrated this extremely contrived arrangement, but I guess that would have meant more background art than the budget would stand, because when we do arrive in their headquarters, we don't even get out of the ship. We just drop a big bomb and fuck off again. Hey, wanna come out and do some world building? Asks the plot. Nah, replies the game. We'll just wait in the fucking car. Hello, Mr. Fisherman. My name's Shay. Hello, Shay. I'm a little bit sad. Why is that, Mr. Fisherman? Because I don't know how to fish. If only I could learn, I'd be less of an inherent failure with a very ironic surname. Well then, let me give you this book about how to learn fishing. Thank you, Shay. I'm glad we're friends. And then they sing a song about how much they like sharing. What's that, Skippy? Wolfenstein the New Order is getting one of those standalone expansion type things? What good news. The New Order made it into my top 5 last year for adding some real depth to the act of cutting an endless parade of Nazi throats like we're a tiny lumberjack in the forest of squishy pink trees. What's that, Skippy? It's going to be a prequel called The Old Blood? What good news. It comes before a thing that's new, therefore it's old. How heartening it is to see that id Software's investment in a dictionary is paying off. What's that, Skippy? Timmy's fallen down a well? What good news. This will give him ample opportunity to explore his interest in geology, and I can put a snooker table in his bedroom. What's that, Skippy? Kangaroo meat is a lean and tasty alternative to beef? Oh, Skippy, I already knew that. That's why I cut off all your arms and legs. Can you wriggle back down to the basement by yourself, or do you need me to kick you down the stairs again? Wait a minute, you extremely tasty marsupial git. A prequel to the New Order. The Nazis raise a giant zombie king just in time for standard boss fight 27 alpha, upper half of large man smashing ledge where the player is with big fists. If Nazi zombies are the Jeopardy timer music of action games, this is the point where the music abruptly stops because you've been hit by a tranquilizer dart. Except it's traditionally the boss fight of the generic third-person game where you have some kind of dodge ability to avoid the fists. And in first person it becomes a frustrating exercise in sprinting back and forth like a streaker at a football match, hoping that the attack brewing somewhere off screen to the right will whiff if you keep moving, and things get even more annoying when Nazis start streaming in who for some reason prioritize shooting you over shooting the giant boss who smashes indiscriminately. I'm thinking these guys misread the orders. Gehen the boss fight, shooten the massive bloke, they read aloud. Did they mean the massive bloke or the incredibly massive bloke? It just says massive Hans, fair enough, die Yankee scum, ach, not my German sausage. Good cyber morning to all you script kiddies and leet hacksaws out there, surfing the information superhighway like a bunch of fucking wankers. You know, it seems like we've been doing the indie double bill thing more often lately because the indie market will probably be all that's left, scurrying around the ruins after the titans of AAA finally reenact the end of Evangelion together. And now your regularly scheduled reminder that the new consoles are shit. The new consoles are shit. Thank you. For further information, look at a new console and rub shit in your eyes. We return for the third time to the adventures of Rivery Gerald, a witcher, that is to say someone who hunts monsters, not witches. It's as needlessly confusing as ever. Why don't they just call it Monster Hunter Oh wait. So Witcher 3 sat me down and went, alright fuckface, how about we spend the entire first chapter of the game tutorializing the bollocks off every feature we have? Would that help His Majesty settle in? Right here, kill the monsters, craft that, punch these blokes, drink this, wipe that on your sword, wipe your cock off on a bedsheet, fight a griffin we have practically nailed to the floor for you. Any fucking questions? Just one. Why do you keep trying to make me play Magic the Gathering? So I'll give Witcher 3 my recommendation for the adept story crafting, but as the housewife said to the Randy Stallion, it's possible to put too much in. Reports are in that Halley's Comet has been sighted and appears to be making a trail in the shape of the winning lottery numbers. But in even less likely news, Nintendo has come up with an entirely new first-party IP. But not only is Splatoon an original IP, it's also a third-person shooter with online multiplayer focus, no less. Don't tell me someone at Nintendo actually opened a curtain for a second and caught a brief glimpse of the direction video games have largely been taking for the last 20 fucking years. Somebody stop them before they actually look out of the window and go into shock-induced catatonia. Still, I think there'll be an increase in the number of Wii U sales with this incredible new title. God knows why it keeps making ink puns, though, when everyone's very clearly throwing paint around, but that's hardly a complaint. Paint. So while the three massively over-leveled Japanese dudes on my team ran ahead to meet the enemy team head-on, I'd stay behind with my big paint roller, because that's totally something you do with ink, isn't it? Put it in a paint roller and ink your living room with a lovely cornflower blue ink. Get your fucking story straight. So what other online content is there? Other online content, said Splatoon, bemused. We've got a whole 2 maps. You can wear different shirts that no one besides you will ever notice or care about. What more do you want? 2 maps? No, of course not just 2 maps. We wouldn't be much of a multiplayer-focused game with only 2 maps, would we? We've actually got 5 maps, thank you very much, but we artificially restrict you to 2 and change them every few hours. Okay, why? What's with all the fucking questions? You see anyone else complaining? Said Splatoon, pointing to the many player avatars standing around the lobby like Village of the Damned, with Miiverse posts floating over their heads saying things like, "This is the best game ever," and "Hooray for Splatoon," and "My connection died again, whoops, I mean I love Nintendo," and "Thanks to Nintendo and to local gaming retailer for bringing me this great game." That was a real message I actually saw. How many checks do you think that guy's cashing? Everything else is trappings and finery, but as trappings and finery goes, it's rather anemic. Maybe that's the sort of criticism that dates a review, after additional content gets patched in later, and perhaps I could interest you in my escort service, where you pay $60 to feed me crisps in the hope that I might decide to knob you at some point. I have an inkling that that'd be a nice little earner, or should I say inker, mother fucker. I know I don't usually use screenshots or footage of the games I review in Zero Punctuation because I wouldn't want anyone to get some misguided impression that I know what the fuck I'm doing, but I'm going to make an exception in this case and share with you my first impression of hatred. Yep, you can see what all the controversy was about now, can't you? That fiery orange text could cause some real emotional damage to a pyrophobe or an Irish separatist. Jeffrey has finally grown tired of people taking the piss out of his hairdo by calling him Madam at the checkout of the trenchcoat and death metal shop, and decides that weighing up all the pros and cons, the logical way forward would be to murder the entire world. So he emerges from his shack dressed for a Texan wedding and starts racking up the body count. You might call it a sick power fantasy, and I would reply, well yeah, that's why it's funny. I picture some spindly angst-ridden teenager seeing something like this in their head moments before they burst into a McDonald's, drop their dad's revolver, and shoot themselves in the kneecap. We live in an age where mass communication has counterintuitively turned all attempts at verbal debate into a basketball game where the teams are on different courts and stand around the basket racking up meaningless points and throwing shit over the dividing wall. The only way an individual can safely express their politics these days is to anonymously spend money. Hence why homophobic pizza joints can mysteriously accrue $1 million in donations. Hatred exists merely as a maypole for those wishing to defy the cultural nannies who want to tell them they can't have it until they learn to wipe their bottoms properly. So two groups of affluent middle-class people annoy each other, hatred makes tons of money, and the world at large gives less of a toss than a quadriplegic shot putter. Good night! The claim that motion controls would enhance immersion was always about as believable as the claim that a sledgehammer can enhance a Fabergé egg, but I genuinely believe that VR represents the way forward for immersive gaming, if they can iron out that whole playing it for more than an hour makes my stomach want to crawl up my throat and file divorce proceedings against my inner ear problem. But of course, Oculus already did its pre-E3 announcement that it was jumping into bed with Microsoft. Yowza, could have broken that more gently, Oculus. You don't come out to your parents in a Christmas card. And also, there's going to be a special two-handed controller that incorporates... That incorporates motion... Oh, God, no! That incorporates motion sensor tech... No! We were so close! We were almost free! Why must we forever carry our failures around with us like a scrotum full of horseshoes? Oh, you can pick up a virtual gun with your actual hand and fire it, 'cause that's what I want added to the process of shooting an enemy, isn't it? My noodly wrist, groping for something that isn't there like a castrated wanker. Hey, Captain Scott, how about we make sure we can actually get to the South Pole before we start making plans to erect the Statue of Liberty there? The shocking Microsoft announcement was that backwards compatibility is coming to the Xbox One. Before we could even start undoing our trousers, however, the great big asterisk came like a shuriken to the eye socket. It's just for a limited range of 360 games. It's like pirates kidnapped our wife and now expect a round of applause because they brought her back after 2 years and only cut off most of her arms and legs. Let's skip ahead a bit to the recipient of Microsoft's wildest fantasy hate fucks, Sony, and nuzzle my hairy crevices if they didn't actually announce The Last Guardian again. The logical successor to its two predecessors in that it looks just like Ico, except with a Colossus instead of the flaky bitch. Not out till next year though. They must be programming this game by carving ones and zeros into stone tablets. Here's a remake of Final Fantasy VII we'll tell you fuck all about, because you already busted a nut before we reached the fourth syllable of the title, didn't you? And last but not least, Shenmue 3's Kickstarter. That's fucking weak. That's about 10 levels below a pre-rendered trailer. Maybe next year you could just have someone come on and go, I'm thrilled to announce that I'm now going to stand here and imagine a game in my head. Give us cash. Hey, we're totally announcing a new Zelda, a new Mario, and a new Metroid Prime. Oh, they're all on the 3DS. Psych! I say Metroid Prime. There's no sign of Samus Aran, and it looks like an N64 threw up on a Star Wars prequel. This is like when your nan buys you Christmas presents. This was what you wanted, isn't it, dear? Almost, Nan. I actually wanted you to jam it between your crusty folds and hammer it home with a wire brush. Horizon Zero Dawn... Nope, I have no earthly clue what that title means. I suspect you came up with it by throwing a set of refrigerator poetry magnets at the side of a speeding car. Well, violate my sense of intestinal security if it isn't another Alone in the Dark game. This venerable series stretches all the way back to 1992 when it virtually codified the fixed camera survival horror genre. Someone even awarded it the ECTS 1993 Best Graphics Award and managed to keep a straight face. From those lofty heights, the series went downhill quickly, spawning 2 sequels and 2 attempted reboots that wobbled up and down between Big Pooh Sandwich and Big Pooh Sandwich with Ketchup. The central game mechanic around which the game names itself is the fact that monsters only become vulnerable in light. This is explained by a piece of story dialogue saying, the monster became vulnerable in light. Nice world building there, Alone in the Dark. As the light hit the creature, mutated plants in the graveyard soil, still clinging to its rotten form, grew with supernatural speed, pushing the hardened scales of its outer flesh apart. See how easy this is? I just made that up! Hey, I could infuse my bullets with the power of Christ in order to turn a single monster into a light source so that all the monsters around it, or I could just napalm the room with my flamethrower, or I suppose you could just napalm the room with your fucking flamethrower. Must have been a blow to spend your whole life currying favour with Jesus to the point that he'll let you weaponize him, and only then find out that gasoline exists. In case you've been spending the last century sitting at the bottom of the Challenger Deep with a really interesting book, Batman is a popular superhero with the power of infinite money, with which he bought a suit of armour for punching people who don't have suits of armour. He's also an incredibly boring asshole with no hobbies, who compensates for this fact by ensuring that no one other than himself gets to do anything interesting. The PC Master Race started sharpening their carbon fibre knives after a PC port that has been most charitably described as a face full of piss on a hot summer's day limped through the castle gates. I wouldn't know about that. I played the console version because I recalled the Arkham Origins PC port being dodgy as well, and I too possess a superpower, the power to remember things. Such as the fact that my new game Hatfall is out and you can play it now. Hip hip hooray, it's great. The problem with superhero movies is that they only have 3 plots. Villain endangers hero's loved one, hero faces villain who is dark reflection of themselves, villain threatens to cover a city in gas that will make everyone as petty as they are. Arkham Knight goes through all 3 multiple times with varying degrees of disconnect and all messily layering over each other like an orgy in a poorly made lasagna. Meanwhile, the Arkham Knight does his bit by flooding the game with interminable tedious side missions, taking down malicious strongholds, which usually entails beating up yet another group of identical toss buckets. The other side mission paths with colourful villains are more fun, but mostly have about 3 to 6 missions in total, whereas there are fucking 40-odd malicious strongholds of varying types. I wouldn't mind, but you need to do a minimum of all this bollocks to get the final ending. It's like withholding the last few pages of a book until the reader has eaten all of the previous ones. There is, however, a surprise third main villain, who I won't spoil, but at least puts the colour back in the game's cheeks. So Arkham Knight does have its moments, certainly better than Origins, and is at worst still fun enough. It should definitely be the last one, because it's about 40% using up the last of the series' good ideas, and 60% pissing about. Anyway, as well as the 5 Yoshi body parts, each level has 5 flowers and 20 special gems, and if you miss any of them, then the end of the level will make damn sure that you know it. No, of course you don't have to laboriously check every inch of the map for secrets, you can still move on to the next level. Also, you don't have to get A's at school, do you? D's still a passing grade, there's no difference. And who cares if your mother weeps with shame every day? At least she hasn't killed herself like your dad did, you fucking loser. So after clearing up a drink spillage, I downloaded Cave Story again to do a retro review, bringing back memories of the first time I downloaded it in 2004. That's a memento mori for you, isn't it? 2004 being retro now. Surely nothing downloadable is retro. Retro to me is anything that was ever sold on a physical medium with which you could conceivably bludgeon someone to death. Cave Story is a platformer shooter type thing developed by someone or something called Pixel. It was originally freeware, it is now sold on Steam for $14.99. So whatever Pixel was, it was apparently playing the fucking long game, but I have a special place in my heart for the solo development racket, Play Hatfall. Sorry, I'm not sure that was subliminal enough. Play Hatfall, you pricks! This game's shit. Oh, sorry, I usually do more of a setup than that, don't I? I'll start again. Goodness me, this game's shit. So, in the category of looking as terrible as its source material, Godzilla earns its solitary A+. I played the PS4 version, and graphically it looks like it belongs on the PS2. Even that is being totally unfair on the PS2. Shadow of the Colossus was on the PS2, but it managed to make its big things feel big. It was like laying my head on the floor of a supermarket as your mum power slides around the corner on a mobility scooter. Godzilla, meanwhile, thinks that all you have to do is make everything move like it's made of depleted uranium. Godzilla himself walks like his parents are having sex and he's trying to sneak past their bedroom door, and every time you press an attack button, you're committed to it for the next half hour. The only thing that can damage Godzilla in a way he can't immediately regenerate is other kaijus. They're all classic enemies of Godzilla, I think, because every time anyone says their name out loud, you can practically hear them mutter registered trademark. They're not trying to defend humanity, nor are you defending humanity from them. They just sort of show up, like a nosy neighbour peering over the fence. Then the two of you clash, by which I mean you go at each other like a pair of nursing home residents who both walked into the TV room and simultaneously noticed there was only one free armchair. I have bad memories from my school days, of shivering on a frozen playing field in the mandatory tiny shorts, waiting for a ball to bounce past and shortly afterwards my head to be bounced between several pairs of studded boots. That's the last time I take a teaching job. Fuck you, that was an actual joke. Might as well do another small game while we're here. How about Tembo the Badass Elephant, an action platformer for Digi-Download? There's a lot about Tembo that just screams indie gaming. The core concept has that very indie try-hard random humour about it, like a man wearing a lampshade in desperate hope of being accepted by his peers. Ooh, it's a commando who's also an elephant. Wow, that's not the sort of thing you'd expect a commando to be. Consider my mind blown like a newly divorced banker on a business trip to Thailand. Also, when it was first released on Steam, they accidentally put out the wrong build at first and had to fix it the next day. Kuh, what a bunch of sillies. But that's the kind of endearing baby giraffe stumbling you have to expect from an indie Wait a minute, published by Sega? Developed by Game Freak? What, the Pokemon guys? King's Quest is remembered as one of the big classic franchises from the earliest days of PC adventure gaming. Christ knows why, it was fucking awful. Set in a generic fairy tale world, designed by someone one suspects has never had an orgasm in their entire life, the games were somehow simultaneously vomit from every orifice twee and utterly jigsaw killer psychotic as they violently murdered the protagonists for walking over a blade of grass too quick. They had the air of taking one's psycho ex-girlfriend to Disneyland. I can only imagine how much more disturbing it would have been if any of the protagonists had had more personality than a dented shovel with a smiley face drawn on it. It also borrows from The Princess Bride in the same way that Arab terrorists borrowed the Iranian embassy that one time. Its attempt to occupy a point somewhere in the middle of comedy, fairy tales, action and drama just leaves it like a laundrette run by genies, wishy-washy. It should also have remembered that if you want to do the naive, bumbling protagonist who must strive through his failings to overcome adversity thing, it would help if the protagonist had any adversity to face. face! The main reason why Graham wins the competition to become a knight is because the judges have all arbitrarily decided they want him to win. And if I were one of his opponents, being told I have to beat him again because the first 2 times weren't for realsies, I feel like I'd be fully justified in taking this matter to an impartiality committee, which is the name I have for my big sword. Nom Nom Galaxy is a sort of resource-gathering base-building game in which the universe is dominated by all-powerful soup companies, and you must travel to various alien worlds to establish new factories and discover new soup recipes. Gosh, isn't it quirky? It's Captain James T. Quirk of the Federation Starship Quaincer Prize. Nom Nom Galaxy, I am going to fucking stab myself in the throat if I have to say that fucking title anymore. On the whole, it's a solid game whose gameplay and art design reflects real effort, talent, and enthusiasm, which is why it just breaks my little heart to have to say that the story cocks it up a filthy drainpipe. You say, despite obviously being a big fan of the Retro Sonics, Freedom Planet paradoxically failed to notice the vital point that Retro Sonic kept his fucking mouth shut. All characterization is established by having the cast verbally explain their personalities to each other. At one point, one of the 3 main playable characters says to the others something like, "Wait, you two finally agree on something?" And I said aloud, "What are you on about? They have never disagreed up to now. They first met 2 levels ago when you all decided on the spot to become BFFs and have a slumber party. And while we're on the subject, why the fuck did you interrupt gameplay for 5 minutes to make me watch that?" Were the authors writing about these characters before they put them in this game, I wonder? Oh Christ, we're playing as someone's persona, aren't we? I know people will tell me I'm just a misery guts who expects too much of everything, but fuck you. You know where we end up if we all stop expecting much? 2 words, President Trump. So let's call Everybody's Going on Holiday what it is, a walking simulator. That new breed of narrative-driven game like your Gone Homes and your Stanley Parables that thinks its writing is so clever it doesn't even need gameplay to back it up. And Everybody Goes to Ravenholm is a walking simulator in the most literal sense. Would it really have killed the intended rich story experience to give us a fucking run button? Hey, everybody loves Raymond. I walked all the way across this meadow you didn't fence off and found nothing but beautifully rendered grass and a snotty handkerchief. Any chance I could get back to the main road in some manner faster than Stephen Hawking trying to get across a shingle beach? What? I thought you liked pacing. I meant in the sense of narrative structuring. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. I put you down for walking around in circles for 4 hours. We gather all this from glowing particle effects that hover around replaying past conversations between the disappeared residents. I guess Chinese Room really don't trust themselves to depict human characters visually, perhaps because they'd all look like fence posts with nice haircuts. But it would be nice to have had something besides voice to go on when we're trying to tell the motherfuckers apart. There are a few people with comically broad Welsh and West Country accents that turn the experience into The Archers meets Quatermass and the Pit. Blimey, no one's going to fucking get that one. So on the whole, I can't say I recommend Everybody's a little bit racist, but just to be clear, I'm not averse to the whole interactive narrative bit, just because at no point in them do I get ambushed by skeleton warriors. Stanley Parable, for example, is really good, but that's because the story is driven by the actions of the player. Everybody Do the Dinosaur is not interactive narrative, it's just plain old narrative classics scattered to the winds, like we're trying to listen to a radio with really patchy reception. Now, I admit I haven't been in Britain for nigh on 10 years now, so maybe Carol Vorderman founded a neo-fascist revolutionary movement while I wasn't paying attention, but most of the British people I know, if you invited them to truncheon an underclass for the greater glory of the superior British race, most of them would reply with, "Oh, I wouldn't want anyone to think I was making a fuss." I think it's fair to say that all bets were right the fuck off when it came to the Phantom Pain, even more than they usually are with Hideo Kojima, aka Hideo, sure I know what tone is, it's the sound made by the little bell that the nice men in white coats say I have to wear, Kojima. Because of course Konami have recently decided they're going to take everything they've built over the years as a game developer, arrange it nicely in front of them, and then pick up a big hammer and smash and smash and smash and smash and smash. Sorry we had to cancel Silent Hills, but we kinda lost our interest in it around the same time we lost our fucking minds! Here, have a pachinko machine instead. We like pachinko machines because it's nice to have something around that has some fucking balls. Most missions just give you one objective in the middle of enemy territory and the rest is up to you. Scout ahead and carefully worm your way inside, or kick the front door down with your robot legs and judo throw the guard into his birthday cake. But the problem that Metal Gear Solid has always had, besides being written by someone who got all his ideas on authentic dialogue from watching the infomercials that come on in between Steven Seagal films, is that they always give you about 100 million methods of achieving something that isn't actually that complicated. And the characters just aren't fun anymore. The 3 leads are all grim, growly men growling grimly. I listen to the audio logs, I can barely tell the fuckers apart, and Kojima's trademark incredibly redundant dialogue doesn't help. In other words, movies are all like, oh look, a little film about S&M perverts driving around a desert and blowing each other up. Well, the Academy need look no further for the best dramatic screenplay candidate. Meanwhile, video games are all like, S&M perverts driving around and blowing each other up? Where the fuck do I sign? Along your cock using my saliva instead of ink? Can do. Mad Max's personality I would rate a 0.7 on the Kratos scale of anti-hero so riddled with generic anger it works against their own best interests. He's filled with naked indignation whenever a character has the balls fools to be in his presence without bashing their heads in on the floor amid a stream of progressively slurred apologies. Remember Kane and Lynch too? I've been trying not to over the years with the able assistance of Dr. Bleach. Putting aside the horrible camera effects and sweaty old man buttocks, it was shit because the gameplay had nothing besides the default third-person shooting. It was just bread and buttocks. The default game lives and dies on a unique selling point, like Shadow of Mordor's little black book of orcs. So what is Mad Max's USP? Well, there's cars. Cars in a sandbox game? Shut your mouth. That would be like putting Bulgarian women in the Bulgarian women's national handball team. So Mad Max is a resounding meh. It's got a perfectly adequate, if occasionally buggy, sandbox setup, but the only USP seems to be the fact that it fucks you about on your way to places, which is precisely the same USP as the Birmingham one-way system. Oh boy, a review not only of a fucking HD remake, but an HD remake of the game that first introduced us to cover-based shooting, with much the same effect as when Kurt Cobain was introduced to the wonderful world of home defense solutions. Better call the aeroplane bathroom maintenance crew, cause some shit's about to start flying. Without a side-by-side comparison, I couldn't tell you if there's been a massive visual improvement, but just in practical terms, I still had the most tremendous difficulty telling the enemy apart from my NPC squad members at first glance, because they tended to die at roughly the same rate, and are all built like the Sugar Puff monster cosplaying as a Doom 3 environment, and incidentally, most classy people would have held out for the 10-year anniversary, Microsoft. I guess you didn't want to bank on getting through another year without every single X-bone imploding from sheer force of suck. Until Dawn is an interactive story of the David Cage school pushed through the filter of slasher movie, with the promise being that if we make all the right decisions, perhaps we could keep all the out-of-work 20-something actors alive. I don't think you were paying attention Until Dawn. I will have made the right decisions if every single one of these gurgle Burks ends up upholstering the soft furnishings in Leatherface's man cave. Mind you, it means later scenes have to proceed on the basis that certain characters could be alive or dead, and because of that, surviving characters seem to get over deaths really weirdly fast. Sorry about your boyfriend, lady. No worries, I'll just bring myself off on his next stump. Look, I'm fine with not every choice splitting the universe. I don't expect picking the fun-sized Twix over the Snickers having a devastating snowball effect, but there's a bit where two characters are in a trap and you have to pick which one dies. Fairly pivotal choice, you'd think, but after restarting the chapter like 4 times, I learned to my annoyance that the game always kills the same one, regardless of your pick. Probably because a later mandatory plot twist hinges on it, but it's not what I'd call branching story. It's more like a log. So here, presumably, is how the conversation went down. Hi, kids! Hi, Uncle who works at Nintendo. Do you like Mario? Sure do. Have you ever wanted to make your own Mario levels and play a theoretically infinite number of community-created ones? More than wanted to, Uncle Nintendo. Fan-created ROM hacks and tribute games have existed almost as long as the games themselves. We know. And now you can take them all away and smash them to pieces with a cease and desist letter on the end of a 2x4. Because now you can do pretty much the same thing with Super Mario Maker. It's considerably less versatile and creatively fulfilling, but here's the good part. It makes us a hell of a lot more money. Say thank you. Thank you, Uncle Nintendo. Now I think we both know you have better ways of showing gratitude than that, kids. But the level editor they provided isn't that flexible, so it's more like an asshole dad batting his 9-year-old's pitch into next door's garden and very slowly going for the home run. Oh, couldn't you make a level as good as us with precisely the same parameters we had about 20 years ago? Better leave it to the grown-ups then. Perhaps I could make something more impressive if the building mode started with more assets unlocked than 2 kinds of stickle bricks and a baby harp seal. I know when you're selling a creativity tool to a general audience that could get distracted by an ant spunking into a tin bath on the other side of the house, you don't want to throw shit like pathfinding AI at them in lesson 1. But if you trust us with a Goomba, one might assume we could muddle our way through Jumpy Fish as well. Look at me, everyone. It took me 4 paragraphs to draw the conclusion that Super Mario Maker is just for making Mario levels. Perhaps we just stick to novelty levels after all, since that's what Super Mario Maker is, a novelty. Hope you liked 2D Mario platformers while they lasted, because now we've stripped them down to their guts and thrown all the bits out to the crowd. Maybe you can extract one more fleeting laugh from them by sticking them out through your trouser zippers and yelling, "Look everyone, I've caught gonorrhea." You can learn a lot about a person by taking them to a self-service buffet. Some people want to try a bit of everything, pineapple and rocket and crusty rolls stacked shoulder to shoulder. They're like Double Fine, always wanting to explore new ideas. Other kinds of people just get a big pile of the same ravioli they had last time. They're like your Ubisoft. They found one thing they like and they're going to stick to it for as long as they can, probably making a little radio tower out of breadsticks. Then there are the people who immediately grab the entire bucket of chicken wings and then sell them back to the other customers for 99 cents each, and that's why you don't invite EA to the buffet. So I suppose if Antoine de Saint-Exupéry were here, he'd ask, would Soma be improved if they took out the monster stealthing altogether and got by with exploration, puzzles and environmental hazards? Also, didn't I die in 1944? Well, I'd say so, Antoine, but if they took out the scary monsters, what else are the streamers and Let's Players supposed to obnoxiously overreact to? Ah, it's so existential! Yeah, Rock Band, remember that? It was that thing where you pretend to play pretend instruments to an audience with such ridiculously eclectic taste that you can put Avenged Sevenfold and 3 non-blondes on the same set list and they'll go equally berserk for both. Rhythm games, it seems, are attempting a comeback after the last generation when it suffered a more painful drawn-out end than the average Metallica song. What fucked it up, I wonder? Maybe the fantasy was broken for players when they finally realise that a real rock band roams about the stage looking cool, kicking wannabe stage divers in the bollocks. They don't stand fixedly in place staring at a monitor, unless Keith Richards has flatlined again. But if you haven't downloaded any additional songs because you're old-fashioned, and think that just because you paid $250 for the game in a shop means you've finished paying for the fucking thing, then you're going to find yourself repeating the same songs a fuck of a lot. It's like putting together a greatest hits showcase for Dexy's Midnight Runners. And at least a freestyle solo might break up the monotony when you're doing a 2000s indie rock song and have been up and downing the same chord for 30 seconds, like a burn victim trying to wank some sensation back into his cock. But I feel that Rock Band might have bought into its own bullshit that the plastic guitar in any way resembles an actual musical instrument with which one can express oneself creatively. If I wanted you to help me express creativity, Rock Band, I'd urinate my name onto your tits. I once described the Assassin's Creed series as a line graph, and here's how it continues. From the point that Unity was at, draw a perfectly horizontal line. The way it's presented, it's like one of those terrible wink-to-audience moments from bad historical films. What did he say his name was? Da Vinci? Well, he won't amount to anything, and may the atomic bomb fall on the Japanese if I'm wrong. Speaking of, remember how Leonardo was a major character in Screedo 2, and the friendship between him and Ezio was actually firmly established? Well, the Sideburns muscled that out too, because every meeting with a historical figure in Syndicate plays like something from a fucking kids' TV series. Hello, I'm the famous Charles Dickens. Hello, the famous Charles Dickens. We're stand-ins for the audience. Hello, stand-ins. I guess that means I can inexplicably enlist you to solve my problems. What problems, the famous Charles Dickens? It's all these random thugs stopping me from finishing the famous books I write. If only there was someone around here who could brutally stab them all to death for me. There's got to be some remnant of the human being who gave us Prince of Persia Sands of Time and sought actual creative fulfillment in there somewhere. Is he not sick of this bullshit yet?
I'm afraid it's too late for me,
intones Ubisoft as it solemnly begins to remove its helmet, and horror grips my heart as the sideburns begin to emerge. But while we're waiting for that, let's take a look at Halo 5, the fifth installment of what was the original progenitor of the open quotes next-gen shooter, i.e. nice skybox shame about the game, or rather the second installment of the new trilogy developed by 343 Industries after original creators Bungie decided, hey, this incredibly repetitive sci-fi shooter garbage with pseudo-mythical pretensions, with the emphasis on pretensions, got old pretty fast. Let's move on to Destiny and see if we can beat our previous speed record. Halo is the premature ejaculation of video games, and I'm not just saying that because Halo 5 feels shorter than Cortana's laundry list. It took till Super Mario Galaxy for Mario to spooge his last, and that was Halo's fucking starting point. Kick off with huge galaxy-spanning threats and giant fat-ass space prostitutes with fanny cankers the size of small moons, and where the fuck are you supposed to go from there? Maybe you could breathe some life in by switching to a more focused character narrative, but the prerequisite for that is actually having characters, beyond titty holograms and giant dustbins on legs. Anyway, Black Ops 3 opens with our burly American heroes doing what they do best, whittling all over the sovereignty of an unstable foreign nation. Events unfold fairly predictably from there until the end of the prologue when our hero gets torn up a treat and has to get cyber-augmented, which raises the usual slew of complex philosophical questions, such as, isn't this blatantly the same plot as Advanced Warfare? Except they couldn't get Kevin Spacey, so they got Robert Picardo instead, the next name on the smart but faintly sinister balding corporate types list. Why are female soldiers always no-nonsense snipers? Says something about the writer, I think, if they perceive women as mostly poking holes in things from a very long distance away. This game's no-nonsense sniper lady becomes a love interest eventually, the writer perhaps having heard that a romance is more satisfying if it occurs despite adversity, and I suppose a total lack of chemistry whatsoever could technically count as adversity. Besides everything else, I'm not sure I could ever fall in love with someone who responds to a grenade landing in her lap by staring at it until it explodes. I mean, I'm not sure I could leave her alone with the children, and a relationship should be give and take, so when she took no damage whatsoever, I wondered why she even needed me around. Did you notice how I seamlessly transitioned there from criticising the story to the AI? This is what earns me the big bucks. But if there's any half-assedness about the main campaign, it's probably because going by the range of alternative game modes available, the Black Ops dev team have the attention span of a moth at a fireworks display. The weirdly elaborate zombie mode is now a given and has only gotten weirder and more elaborate to the point that they actually hired Ron Perlman and Jeff Goldblum to be in it, which makes it all the more baffling that the protagonist of the main campaign had to make do with a random person they picked up from the bus shelter outside a brain hemorrhage clinic. As before, there's something rather manipulative about all this, but I think the writers need to accept that they're banking on a finite resource. Yeah, maybe the first time the ickle girly whirly got her shit ruined, it triggered a protective instinct, but by incident umpteen squillion, I wouldn't lend her bus fare to the hospital if Saint gives a shit. Yahtzee, are you trying to inflate the gameplay problems in this bland, but let's face it, perfectly functional piece of middle ground tosh? Probably, yeah. Something about the new Lara Croft rubs me up the wrong way, unlike the old Lara Croft who rubbed me up in a perfectly satisfactory way, especially when I was stuck opposite her on a packed subway train. You know what? I don't have to climb up this burning ski resort and zipline off it onto a tiger, and I don't have to ensure my father's legacy either. I'm gonna do it because I want to, because I have a death wish the size of William Howard Taft's trousers and an electric complex the size of my tits. Bethesda RPGs are always deeply explorative, but never immersive. They make for some great screenshots, but the moment it has to start living and animating, you find it full of blank-eyed computer programs trams who struggle to navigate a 6-lane highway without a carelessly placed dog turd making their pathfinding bugger up, and who have a weird habit of mysteriously vanishing in front of doors, which the doors always find so surprising that they momentarily forget how doors are supposed to work. Is Fallout 4 any different? Do lamprey eels give pleasant blowjobs? Oh well. You play as one half of a loving couple in possession of a comically badly made animatronic doll that you somehow convinced yourself is a baby. Don't even get me started on town building, because that's totally what we want to do in an exploration game, isn't it? Behold, stout adventurer, 100 square miles of adventure and peril. Great, I'll just squat in the top left corner for 6 hours, building a giant light-up wooden statue of Michael Nesmith. And the conversation system's been really simplified, and now it's actually quite difficult to be a complete git. The most you can usually do is agree to solve everyone's problems in a slightly sarky tone of voice. Yeah, I suppose I could just shoot them the moment they stop flapping their moist jaws like a broken animatronic vagina, but there's no karma system, and it's no fun being reprehensible unless I know I've disappointed someone. That's why I'd always wait for my parents to be around before I started sticking dog shit up my nose. Anyway, Star Wars Battlefront is a multiplayer shooter set in, as you could guess from the title, the Blake 7 universe. Why not play with friends, I hear you ask? Good idea, Ranulph. Try organising 40 mates into a single game and let me know how it went once you get released from being sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Star Wars Battle Cunts certainly puts the emphasis back on the wars part, but you know what this kind of game is? It's an asshole recruitment drive. You start playing as a fresh-faced level 1 and get murdered by assholes. Obviously you don't give a half ounce of creamy baby excrement about helping your team win. Your only real motivation is to avenge yourself upon the assholes. But by the time you've got the better guns that the assholes used on you, they've moved on to firing dark matter jizz rockets out of their level 40 diamantine vaginas, and so you can only avenge yourself on their lower level teammates, ensuring that the bleak cycle will begin anew. Congratulations, you're part of the asshole system. Yes, it's almost Christmas, and there's just time to get caught up with something I missed before the end of year roundup. Project Zero Maiden of Blackwater on the Wii U. If you're not familiar with this franchise, it's kind of like Ringu by way of Pokemon Snap. You take candid paparazzi photographs of Japanese ghosts, so all their ghost cellulite gets put on display in Ghost Cosmopolitan and they die of shame. The series is called Fatal Frame in the US, which is one of the few cases of an American localization change I wholeheartedly support. Not only is Fatal Frame snappier, no pun intended, but it actually means something. It's a game about death and photography. Fatal Frame. It is not a game about whatever the fuck Project Zero means. What, are we taking pictures of ghosts for our school project, which is the prequel to the first school project we made? Or maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong and it's Project Zero, as in a game about characters from Metal Gear Solid 3 being forcefully thrown out of a nightclub. Which leads us to the question, if the game isn't scary, challenging or interesting, then what does it have left? Well, I'm glad you asked, myself. The answer lies in the mechanic wherein the ghosts get more aggressive the more wet you are. Well, the playable characters are always pretty fucking wet, but I meant in the moisture sense. How you know that you're wet is that your clothing becomes realistically clingy and see-through, which sheds certain light on the fact that most of the protagonists are teenage girls wearing thin white cotton blouses. Oh, that's right, it's a Koei Tecmo game. I did wonder why most of the female ghosts were rocking more cleavage than the San Andreas Fault. As always, only games that have been reviewed in zero punctuation are in the running for the top and bottom 5. That being the case, bear with me a moment. Undertale is a good game. Might ruffle some feathers here, because this game was perfectly functional, but I feel the need to take a stand against games that think a handful of mindless multiplayer modes is worth exactly the same retail price as 4 full-length retro games plus the pizza afterwards. It was going to be either Evolve or Star Wars Battlefront, and Star Wars clinched it for the slightly patronising attitude of, we all know you nerds will buy anything with a Wookiee in it. You know what, before we move on, good games yay, bad games boo is all very well, but what about the third category? For the first time, I'd like to introduce a third top 5 list, celebrating the games that did nothing interesting, took no risks, pushed nothing forward, and which were generally to the year of gaming what Martin O'Malley was to televised debate. Without further ado, here's my 5th blandest game of 2015. What's that? Jim Sterling just did something like this. Well, it's a good thing everyone knows that I write these a few weeks in advance, isn't it? Otherwise, they might have accused me of ripping him off and made complete fucking fools of themselves. While it has its moments, Batman Arkham Knight made its mistake when it thought, how can we enhance our characteristic stealth action adventure for the last installment? Oh, I know. Let's take out some of the stealth action adventuring and replace it with Tonka toys being smashed together in the clumsy fists of an idiot god. Everybody's gone to the Rapture, or as it might as well have been called, everybody's gone to the toilet on the reasonable assumption that they won't miss anything. I'm all for doing new things with interactive story, but after you throw away traditional ideas of pacing, challenge and coherent narrative, you are actually then supposed to replace them with something. Have you ever wanted to be a giant all-powerful monster? What about a giant all-powerful monster wading through knee-high runoff from the dog food factory? What about a bloke dressed as a giant all-powerful monster attempting to navigate a discount furniture warehouse wearing really uncomfortable shoes? No, didn't think so, but here's Godzilla anyway. May it return to its 1,000-year slumber at the bottom of the ocean just in time for another BP oil spill. No sense being coy, it's Undertale, the darlingest of 2015's indie darlings, which I haven't reviewed properly because it really is best experienced from knowing as little as possible, not unlike a leaky hump. The basic appearance hides a deep narrative that manages to to be funny and touching without horrifically derailing itself, as well as the kind of unique and deconstructive gameplay that actually makes an impact on the medium, unlike the following. Well, in fairness, it did have some impact, that being the impact of Sony's hand against its forehead as they muttered, "Christ, what the fuck were we thinking?" Where do you start on The Order 1886, the werewolf game with like 3 werewolves in it, that took all the potential of its setting and fired it out of drab, tedious cover shooter gameplay, with a plot that just sort of gave up and cut off halfway through? Well, I don't know where to start, but I know where to stop. When the hacksaw blade gets lodged in the pelvic bone. Poor old 343 Industries, they tried so hard to make Halo 5 interesting. They played up Master Chief being hunted for crimes, and then his crime was like 1 notch below an unpaid parking ticket. They bring Cortana back to life, and that had all the impact of finding a rotting Malteser under a beanbag chair. There's only so much you can do with the material, I suppose. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece with used bathwater on a canvas of dryer lint, in a house made of bog roll. In Swindon. Well, I hope we all had some nice holidays. I didn't, because I spent part of them playing Devil's Third. At least I think I did. I also locked myself in a bathroom and ate an entire pound of brandy butter, so it's possible I hallucinated it. The quickest possible description for it would be poor man's Metal Gear Solid. And I mean really poor. Like the kind of Metal Gear Solid that was brewed from ketchup packets in a prison toilet. You know how Hideo Kojima's approach to including real-world politics and history in his games is to read the first line of the Wikipedia page and then get bored and set a whale on fire? Devil's Third somehow does even less. The terrorists are part of an organisation called, seriously, SOD. Ivan himself was once a sod, but switched sides, having made it through training and induction without realising that terrorist groups kill people. I guess he was sick that day. Some of the loading screens try to pick up the slack, though. Did you know that Pancake Dave gets his powers from the legendary martial art named Raymond Strawberry Trousers? Thank you for letting me know, loading screen, but since I killed Pancake Dave 3 missions ago, I'm not sure why you brought it up. Incidentally, you can climb up some of the walls in Devil's Third, but not all of them. And the best way to figure out which is to kidnap one of the developers and hold a gun to their head. But I think what ultimately condemns Devil's Turd, I said it again, in case you missed that incredibly hilarious joke the first time, is that it's complete nonsense. First you're some Duke Nukem-esque lone hero in sunglasses and only missing the singlet because it burst off you in your last flexing session. Then suddenly the game is pretending to be a modern military shooter and you're in a unit of American soldiers you're apparently supposed to care about, but whose members come and go like the Megadeth lineup. Then mutant monsters show up for a bit and things turn Resident Evil-y before the soldiers all piss off and the game turns into a World War II shooter for like 5 minutes before the monsters show up again. All over the place doesn't do it justice. That implies there was only one place for it to be all over. This is the Bukkake shoot that got cut short after the participants drowned. The premise of Paper Jam is that a magic book gets inevitably disturbed and a swarm of paper characters descends upon the Mushroom Kingdom and everyone gets to meet the alternate paper version of themselves. It's like a stationary-themed remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Thus is the stage set for a Mario and Luigi game to make its usual 2 jokes. 1, let's all laugh at Luigi for having emotions, and 2, boy howdy that princess sure gets kidnapped a lot. Only now it's 2 princesses, and there's a scene where they're stuck in a cage together where I was absolutely convinced they were about to start lesing up. Pressured to perform on stage at the great spelling bee of creativity, Paper Jam wets its knickers and runs crying to the Mario comfort zone, or rather zones. Everyone sing along: grasslands, desert, ocean, jungle, ice world, fire world, boss. In fact, those are literally the areas we visit in order of progression. It's like a Minecraft map where the biomes are only 12 foot across. Lastly, most notably, we have papercraft fights. Every now and again the whole turn-based combat 2D RPG thing nips off to the green room for a Gatorade and a wank, while we play a totally disconnected 3D fighting minigame in which characters fling oversized cardboard facsimiles of themselves at each other. It's like trying to play air hockey on a table on which some people are trying to fuck. Anyway, the real question for me is how they built these things. All I know is we rounded up a bunch of paper toads and sent them to work in the weapons development lab. Where are they getting all the cardboard from? Oh my god, you monsters! You may have heard, as I did, from the gratuitous Stabbing Murder Quarterly Digest, that Assassin's Creed is being put to bed for a year so it can stare at its bedroom ceiling through a film of tears and wonder if she's ever coming back. And I was all like, a AAA game publisher acting with a modicum of self-awareness? I'm pretty sure that was in the Book of Revelations somewhere. I'm totally on board with this plan. Fuck, I'll come and tuck Assassin's Creed in if it wants, lay down the rubber sheet in case Assassin's Creed 3 shits the bed again. So if you are fielding suggestions, Ubisoft, how about a plot that's actually based around how the two groups differ ideologically, rather than yet another gritty, violent remake of It's a Mad World? I mean, the whole Sasso-Tempo conflict is just he said, she said at this point. All ideological movements with no specific end goal inevitably descend into just another group with no purpose except to sustain its own existence and shun the opposition. That's why debating on the internet is like trying to headbutt a brontosaurus to death. It's also got a great big curry-scented stiffy for timed levels, most of which also obnoxiously demand perfection, but at least they mainly have the decency to just kill you when you fuck up. They don't try to convince you could escape from your fuck up because it wants an excuse to beat you up in front of its girlfriend. One entry I noticed at one point included the phrase, way too dangerous. Who the fuck wrote that? The girl from Clueless? Yeah, so like, there were Templars and they totally did bad things and stuff. A highly subjective gripe, I know, but I don't think this industry can afford to let writing standards slip any lower. They're already wheelchair accessible. acceptable. For one thing, it freely admits that the spunky teenage girl character is 13, which does make it a little bit creepy that you can dress her up in swimsuits, but I respect the game for not chickening out and claiming she's 18 in the English translation. That said, the effort to make sure the plot leaves no one behind starts to wear on me quick, like when they mention the Earth getting blown up like 19 times in the first hour. Then there's a mission early on where your support characters go, "Wait, we should be careful, there's a strong monster ahead. Usually these kinds of monsters are not very strong, but this one is quite strong indeed. I see, so we should be careful and prepare ourselves for a fight against this strong monster." Sorry, are you really taking 5 fucking minutes to explain to me the concept of elite monsters? Why are you banging on about this when no one's yet told me where I get my giant robot? It's all very unintuitive, and you get to do all of this while listening to the same 4 or 5 music tracks until you want to find whatever hip-hop artist coined the practice of going, yeah, in place of lyrics, and push a small volume of Shakespearean sonnets down his windpipe. In fact, you know what? The main thing that kept me going was seeing how long it was going to take before the game would finally give me the fucking giant robot advertised on the box. For most of it, it was like I was hinting to my parents what I wanted for Christmas, and the game was just going, well, maybe if you're very good, the giant robot fairy will visit someday. You want to know how long it took? 24 hours in, 6 or 7 story chapters. Fuck me, the Spanish Inquisition wouldn't tease you for that long. 25 hours and I had a giant robot to call my very own. Gleefully, I took it for a spin around the overworld, leaping, dancing, turning into a car, stepping on the toes of a level 60 elite monster, and getting destroyed in one hit. Well, that was an anticlimax. No, wait. This is an anticlimax. The Witness is a new game by Jonathan Blow. Ironically, it sucks. Oh, the mean old puzzles hurt Yahtzee Boo-Boo's fragile little gamey brainy Wayne. Perhaps he'd be more suited to the kind of puzzle where you only draw straight lines connecting a shotgun barrel to a foreign insurgent's left testicle. Hey, Twat Finder General, I solved the puzzles, I just wasn't having fun doing so. I completed the whole island, turned on all the laser beams, opened up the mountain to what I suspect was the final climactic area, and then the game threw 15 more line drawing puzzles at my face, and frankly, fuck that. Congratulations on getting through that bowl of dog food, player. Here's your reward, another helping of dog food. Hey, Yahtzee, said Steam towards the end of the week, do you remember that announcement trailer you saw a while back for a game called Bombshell? I do indeed. It was one of the worst trailers I've ever seen. I think they made it by gluing poser models together with cold spunk. Oh, well the game's out now. Peachy fucking keen! And the fact that she's a woman is the central, if not only, element of her identity. The single fact that tells you everything you need to know is that she uses a rocket launcher called the PMS. Wow, that's some next level shit there. Suppose we should be grateful it wasn't hot pink and fired Sex and the City DVDs. Gravity Rush is a game first released in 2012 that at the time nobody played. Oh, don't be so hyperbolic, Yahtzee. You know full well it was a PlayStation Vita exclusive. I beg your pardon. Gravity Rush is a game first released in 2012 that at the time nobody played except for some mad people. As I said, there's monsters, we never figure out where they come from. Wait, this one was trying to protect someone. Is there more to them than meets the eye? No, move on. Look, there's another homeless stripper with gravity powers. Perhaps she knows who we really are. She doesn't. Oh. Well, did we both get gravity powers from the same source? Probably. Who cares? Now there's a mysterious master thief antagonizing us who seems to know something about our past. Oh, he's dead. Never mind. Oh no, the city's been taken over by a fascist military state. What could their sinister plan be? Is it to weaponize It's to weaponize the monsters. How did you guess? Other than it being the video game fascist military state default setting. You might think this is starting to sound like they made XCOM again with just enough veneer of originality to call it a sequel. In which case, you're mostly right. Well done. Here's your slightly incomplete trophy. You might also think that since I liked XCOM 1, I'd be perfectly on board with XCOM Another One, and now you're not so right, better give me that trophy back. There's a bit more of an emphasis on the character editor that lets you create a pool of wacky funsters for the game to randomly pick as soldiers and VIPs, which I suggest using because the random characters the game creates on the fly don't seem to have any sense of fun at all. There's all kinds of funny hats and Dame Edna spectacles to go around, but all the game produced for me was dudes with male pattern baldness and ladies with granny haircuts. Loosen the fuck up, guys. Our comrades in the field are dying for your right to dress like a complete tosser, and the notion that aliens are accepted by the masses as benevolent overseers while mostly consisting of hissy monsters is pretty absurd. They make a big thing of how they use armoured soldiers that pass for human to hide their true nature, but the effort seems kinda wasted the first time you see them on patrol with monsters. I just don't think people would accept a giant snake as the new local constable. Good morning, PC Hissy. I'm very well, thank you, PC Hissy. How's the brood? Firewatch's dialogue-based storytelling did draw me in. There's a lot of character to it, and quite a lot of variation based on what order you do things and how much about Henry's personal life you reveal to the voice in the box. It must be jolly complicated, as evidenced by the occasional fart, like when the lady started yelling about finishing her crossword halfway through the deepest point of the scary intrigue, but I found myself disappointed by the explanation of the mystery at the end. Oh, all mysteries are disappointing once explained, Yahtzee. That's why no one listens when you explain that the Loch Ness Monster was your granddad doing the backstroke with his knob out. As for Layers of Fear, like PT, it's not much more than a showcase of spooky set pieces, but PT never claimed to be a complete game. Makes me think of Evil Within. You try to make an entire game out of a delusional nightmare sequence, and it gets boring because it never lets up, and the nightmare becomes the norm. Bid us to sit down and pull the chair away as we do so, but don't keep doing it. Do it once, then apologise, let us sit for a while, wait till we're calm, then throw spiders at our face and burn the house down. That's what I do, and I've never heard complaints. No coherent ones, anyway. This really is one of those occasions that highlights the gulf between video game critics and their audience, besides the fact that we're immeasurably sexier. I could sit here on my sexy arse complaining that Ubisoft have hacked out another addition to one of their franchises that plays pretty much the same as the previous, only now it's wearing a different hat, but most people seem to think, who cares? It's not like we're under obligation to play every game that comes out and disproportionately demand novelty for the sake of getting through another week without jamming a steel bracket through our eye sockets and turning ourselves into a human coat rack. That's a small, admittedly sexy minority of weirdos. Maybe Ubisoft are just catering to normal, boring, unattractive people who like Far Cry just fine as it is, but could go for seconds. The thing is, hypothetical speaker, that if it's just Far Cry you want, then Far Cry 3 has yet to be topped and hasn't gone anywhere. It's even got quite a good plot, the occasional titty. So there's got to be some shriveled part of you that expects novelty, or they wouldn't need to keep bringing out new ones in different settings. There, I win the argument, now piss off, you're getting straw all over the place. And what passes for a story is over in under 2 hours. There are challenge modes after that, but I've established to my satisfaction what a dying red figurine looks like, thanks. The aesthetic deliberately goes for the retro computer look, so the menus are all in ASC2, and there's added scan lines, bloom and curving at the edges to look like it's on a CRT monitor, a style that is just now veering over into being prevalent enough in indie games to start trying my patience. I didn't buy a flat screen TV to be constantly reminded of the obsolete shit it's supposed to have replaced indie gaming. That's what we elect new presidents for. The story is told partly through a fake instant messenger, during which we are expected to pretend to type in order to make the protagonist's dialogue appear. There's something faintly pathetic about that. It's like the audience participation at the Christmas panto. We all know damn well the forthcoming events will not change whether we yell, "He's behind you," or not. But you're going to hold everything up until we say it, aren't you fucking cross-dressing bitch? Whenever a new Tom Clancy game comes out, I always have to double-check his Wikipedia page to make sure he's still dead. He's prolific for a corpse. Still, it explains a few things. You'd have to be pretty fucking brain-dead to think The Division was any fun. Arf, hey-oh, games journalism, etc. Division is a third-person cover shooter set in a near-future Manhattan where there was a total breakdown of law and order on Black Friday. No change there, then. On this occasion, however, a terrorist released a weaponized virus and the resultant pandemic has reduced New York City to a post-apocalyptic gang-terrorized quarantine zone, which on the bright side might finally bring down the average rent. We are a member of a secret government agency called The Division that consists of agents secretly inserted throughout the general population for no particular reason, now being activated to go into ruined Manhattan and jolly well sort it out. Because it turns out Wayne LaPierre was right all along. The only thing that can stop a bad roving pack of murderous thugs is a good roving pack of murderous thugs. The Division gave me a priapism and a week-long bout of constipation. I was bored stiff and bored shitless. Remember how a while back I said we should stop using the phrase Dark Souls clone? Just like I once said we should stop saying Grand Theft Auto clone, and then Sleeping Dogs came out and I had to say spoke too fucking soon. I've got nothing left if I can't call Salt and Sanctuary a Dark Souls clone. If it put a banana on its head, I could call it that game that's got a banana on its head, but until that day, let's stick with Dark Souls clone. There are plenty of gameplay differences, and there's the fact that Dark Souls never had a super deformed character art style reminiscent of an edgy webcomic from the early 2000s, drawn by someone who wasn't very good at anatomy but considered it very important that there exist a picture of furry Jesus Christ trying to free his knob from a stillborn fetus. On the whole, I seem to remember enjoying my time with saltine crackers, but then I've never been the same since The Stroke. It's an all-star voice cast. David Hayter, Jennifer Hale, Dwight Schultz plays the villain. There's no one quite like Dwight Schultz for playing characters who seem like they could sorely use a good hard cock up their arse. I've spoken to people who said they don't like stealth gameplay because it's boring. It's sitting in a hole with a thumb up your butt, waiting for a guard to turn around. Where's the big cock action to distract me from contemplating my empty existence? Obviously, I burned them to death, but dash it if Repube-like didn't remind me of that argument. Cause the guards amble along their predictable patrols like a slug trying to decide what videos to rent out, dated simile. Then you can buy some special powers that make their routes even more predictable and the slugging even more sluggish. There are tasers and pepper spray lying around everywhere on the off chance they spot you, and even if you've run out, they just take you to a cell in the next room and leave the door unlocked, bending over backwards to not leave the crap outs behind. It's like a wrestler having to pretend to lose to a cancer kid for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Now, if you decided as a sensible person would that the AAA industry is about due to suffocate to death on its own farts, and that it was time to flee the sinking ship stroke farting bottom, and seek refuge in the more creatively rewarding sphere of core indie games, perhaps you'd see the value in trying to ingratiate yourself with your new chosen clique. In practice, however, it evokes the one desperate dweeb at high school who hangs around the cool kids. Hey kid, jerk us all off. Can do! Does this mean we're friends? Not until you eat this ladybird. So I guess my advice is play as far as the third episode and then lower your expectations into a shallow grave grave in the woods. Our protagonist, Lo Wang, is remodeled as a quipping, egotistical, bungling badass with an only slightly less silly accent, and so brings to mind the comedy Asian bloke from the Hangover movies being cast to understudy Bruce Campbell in Army of Darkness. He's sent by a shady boss-type man to acquire a magic sword from some other gang leader type, but Wang doesn't have a name that means cock for nothing, and soon acquire has turned into steal, kill everyone, burn house down. However, the world is soon hit by an invasion of genocidal demons, and it becomes clear that there are darker forces than the shady boss man with an interest in the niceties of magic sword ownership rights, and Wang sets out to finish the job and get the sword to his master. Somewhere along the way, this turns into kill his master and eventually kill the lords of Demon Town as well, and I'm not entirely certain where the changes happened. See, the recurring issue I had with the plot is that the game seems to think Wang is undergoing a character arc, and speaking as the guy who spent 8 hours inhabiting his skull, I beg to differ. Every foreskin fumigating time I have to play an X-Bone game, that dusty rectangular turd has to make an adventure of it. I thought I'd get clever this time and put the disc in a few hours before I intended to play it, only to switch to the X-Bone after lunch and find it saying, "Disc doesn't ring a bell, take out, put back in, oh that disc, suppose I better install it then, 1%, 2%, 47%, phew that was tiring, think I'll stay at 47% for the next 3 hours. The villain is played by Aiden Littlefinger, who plays him very well, except for the pre-villain phase of the character, because he constantly comes across like he's waiting for the chance to lick the back of your head. He really is the actor for whom the word snake-like was invented. He certainly uses his tongue like a snake. He sticks that thing out so much it should have its own IMDb page. Maybe his tongue in particular makes me unsettled, because I remember all the shit he got up to in Queer as Folk, and I chose the words of that sentence very carefully. Time manipulation in action games is nothing new. Bullet time has been with us for ages, which Remedy should know because they invented it, but very few of Jack's time powers are actually time-related in any practical sense. What are you talking about, barks the game? You've got your time stun, your time dash, your time shield. They've got time right there in the name. What more do you want? Time shield? It just stops bullets. It's a Mario star in a pretentious haircut. Look, this is my time handkerchief. Woo! It uses the uncanny power of the fourth dimension to stop flying bogeys and occasionally spunk. Let me say right out of the gate that you can call me Billy Blue biased bollocks on this one. If you're looking for a fresh perspective on Dark Souls, you can hop off to Jimmy Neutral the Sexless Gamer's YouTube channel, so he can whine about getting murdered with knives over and over again, as he scratches the disappointing little nubs that one day, God willing, will become his balls. I haven't got the slightest idea what Dark Souls 3 would be like for a newcomer to the series. I imagine it'd be like meeting your girlfriend's family in Newcastle. You get talked at like you're supposed to know what they're on about for an hour, and then get brutally killed with sticks. And incidentally, isn't it impressive how From Software can trot out these massive open-world games with such suspicious frequency? I ain't judging, I've been using the same imp graphic for 8 years, but I do get a sense that Dark Souls is repeating itself quite a bit. Yes, like everyone else, when Sigmire showed up I had a happy little trouser accident, but only until I thought about it. As we all should know by now, a good sequel jumps off from the original, a bad sequel wallows in it. Dark Souls 2 jumped off, now Dark Souls 3 has jumped right back on again, tunneled back into Dark Souls 1 and gone to sleep. It's like they ran out of new stuff at some point and filled in the gaps by carving off some chunks from the great big ball of Dark Souls and Bloodborne that now floats around the office, occasionally commanding them to kill. You know, Yahtzee, I don't think you've ever given the new console generation a fair chance. What do you mean? When I get together with the X-Bone and the Piss Poor and rhythmically smash their heads together while screaming, "Why are you holding us all back, you bastards, you bastards, you bastards," they could change my mind in an instant. All they have to do is explode and stop blighting the universe with their presence. Nintendo, you're making this way too fucking easy for me. What should we go with? Star Fox Zero interest? Star Fox Zero gameplay? Ooh, Star Fox Zero punctuation. That's the thing we're currently doing, isn't it? Nintendo have done it again. Oops, sorry, wrong emphasis. Nintendo have done it again. They've made one of their layabout children who hasn't worked in decades come up from the basement and sit at the dinner table with their new stepfather hardware gimmicks, whom Nintendo hastily married in a Vegas shotgun wedding during a time when they were feeling low and vulnerable. Aim your lasers by tilting the screen controller, went the game's tutorial. Press the target button to... Hey, what the fuck are you doing in the options menu? Did you really think you could turn off the tilting controls? I'm afraid we're trapped in this hell together, matey. Sorry, for one blindly optimistic moment, I thought Nintendo might have realised that insisting on a single control scheme is unhelpful in our wonderful world of all kinds of people with varied preferences and levels of flexibility. Can I at least adjust the sensitivity? As my elbows are still sore from stabbing a policeman to death, and I prefer not to have to make large movements. No, you can't, you uppity sod. Here's your options. You can turn on a thing that makes the aiming control somehow even worse, or you can soak up your little vagina spillage and come and join us in the real world. Now here's how the fucking targeting controls work. Sorry to be picky again, but do you have any other targeting systems available? Like, say, for example, one that fucking helps? One that could maybe target the enemy ship that's closest or that my aiming reticle is pointing at, rather than the one wearing the prettiest dress? And I should mention that when the campaign proper began and I saw the map of 8 or 9 planets representing upcoming levels, I assumed that this was World 1, Super Mario 3 style. Imagine my surprise to discover that this was in fact the entire game. And it was all over in about 2.5 hours, but I suppose that worked in its favour, because I remember thinking that if the game went on much longer after that fucking robot gorilla boss fight, then I was going to kick it down a flight of stairs. Perhaps it should have aspired to be even shorter. Hell, if it had melted as soon as I opened the box, it might even have gotten 5 stars. Of course, the game does say we're perfectly welcome to play it single player, but I've fallen for that one before, haven't I? Like with Evolve and Star Wars Battlefront, which technically do have single player, in the same way that a hotel room does technically have a bidet if they hire someone to lie on the bathroom floor and spit up your asshole. How's about this for breaking the mold? Princess Peach gets kidnapped, right, by somebody other than Bowser. Bam! And the 7 stars you have to to collect her 7 crystal stars this time. Fucking hell, guys, rein the creativity in before it starts triggering miscarriages. In between Mario's chapters, you briefly play as Princess Peach in the villain's hideout, finding a way to send help or information to the outside world, and she's able to do this because early on the villain's computer spies on her taking a shower, and then spends the rest of the game contriving new reasons for her to take her clothes off. It might sound exploitational to you, but I think she comes across rather well. She's a diplomat, not a fighter, and she's finding opportunities to leverage the upper hand, making full use of the assets she has available. Both of them, in fact. She'd last longer than Mario in Game of Thrones. She'd have a strategic marriage in the bag before you can say nudity clause. Strip the adventure out of Uncharted 4, and it's just people with no idea how to communicate with each other, the game. I know that's kind of the point when Nathan Drake creates a rift with his wife by not telling her he's going on an adventure, but towards the end, when they're together again and are having a big reconnecting scene, these people who've been married for years still can't fucking communicate. All they do is quip and talk into their shoes. It makes me fucking cringe. I want to step in, shove them aside, and do the dialogue myself with sock puppets. If you dropped a Shakespearean character into the Uncharted universe, they would stand out like a neon pink Johnny in a cucumber patch. Come join me now, ye gentles all, and crouch behind yon chest-high wall. There's yet another prolonged flashback chapter in the mid-game where we learn the circumstances under which he and his brother took the name Drake and began adventuring, and it's treated like the moment when Bruce Wayne sees a bat flapping about and decides, as any sensible person would, to start wearing black pajamas and a bucket on his head. For me, it's like having a drawn-out flashback scene revealing the exciting origin of his trousers. I didn't think it was that important. I just assumed he put them on that morning because his ballet tights were in the wash. You're a hardcore retro shooter focusing on fast pace and mobility while fighting off hordes of monsters? Well, it won't be truly retro unless it's level-based with open-ended maps and key hunting. Oh, it does have that. Alright then, but you couldn't resist having weapon reloading. That's the one thing that shooter developers always put in these days without considering how it screws up the pace of, oh, there's no reloading. Alright, what the fuck are you up to, Bethesda? For me, this is like when an attractive young woman comes up to me in a bar and says, you know, I am so attracted to aging socially awkward hairy men who play too many video games. Why not buy me a drink and then perhaps a house? So hopes weren't high when Doom opens with the protagonist having to listen to a voice on a computer screen, until 5 seconds into the speech, our hero smashes the monitor like a confused gorilla, then starts shooting zombies and never stops. The game's a little bit crazy with the upgrades. There's character upgrades, runes that give you passive buffs, and the main currency is weapon upgrades. They give that shit away like condoms at a Planned Parenthood clinic. You killed all the monsters, weapon upgrade. You went into a secret, weapon upgrade. You came back out of the secret, weapon upgrade. Why the fuck not? In Homefront world, North Korea is a global center of tech manufacturing and the US is cripplingly indebted to it. Guys, if you want the villains to be China, just make the villains China. The characters must all have hitboxes like brick chimneys because they can get stuck on discarded crisp packets. The one incident which was the defining moment of the game for me took place in a Resistance hideout, where I guess I'd forgotten to flush the toilet properly before I left because 2 NPCs came over and pinned me to a wall. They both stood staring at me, refusing to move, and every time I tried to get past them, they'd hurl foul-mouthed abuse. Well, fuck you too, game. If I wanted this treatment, I'd have attended my brother's wedding. And if Hurdy-the-Gurdy doesn't end up in the year's bottom 5, then it's a fucking depressing 6 months ahead. Homefront the Revolution is just a game that's past its time. Its time was 1346 AD when the Black Death broke out. Yes, if there were hopes for a Coke and Pepsi-style rivalry between the games, they seem to have been well and truly dashed. The loser already poured down the sink to provide sewer rats with slightly claggy aftertaste forevermore. But people seem to be down on Battleborn from the moment it came out, and I'm not sure I understand why. I mean, yes, the gameplay's utterly boring, and the menus are horribly designed, and the dialogue writer's idea of creating personality is to make every character talk like Buffy the fucking Vampire Slayer, but in other words, it's an entirely typical Gearbox game. Overwatch, meanwhile, has Team v Team multiplayer, and that's it. And while I can respect wanting to focus on doing one thing really well, rather than everything blandly, I'm iffy about selling such a game for full price. Its mentor, Team Fortress 2, never cost 70 fucking bucks, even before it was free, and Overwatch has micropayment sales on top of that. Blizzard must rack up a lot of maintenance costs polishing up those massive brass balls of theirs. Remember that little controversy when Blizzard cut out a pose of a character sticking her bum out because one person complained? That annoyed me, not because of my personal bum preferences, but because making a change after one solitary complaint shows just how little shit they gave about artistic vision. Every character is an archetype, cynically designed to pander to some section of the audience. There's the obvious eye-candy girlies wearing cling film, but there's also a muscle lady and a chubby girl in specs, so the gender specials don't throw a strop. Then we'll have 2 samurais and a mecha girl for the weeaboos, a cowboy for dudes with slightly weird ideas about the masculine ideal, and a skull-face murderer for dudes with even weirder ideas about the masculine ideal. Continuity is a bit like getting the pornography channel on a hotel room television. We can all agree it's nice to have, but if it's not there, it's difficult to explain why it's so important to you. You might reasonably wonder what relation Mirror's Edge Catalyst has to the original Mirror's Edge. Is it a sequel or a prequel or a reboot or a soft reboot or a hard reboot or a traumatically invasive reboot behind the bike sheds? And the answer is good old plain reboot classic. So it's the same main character in the same city with the same red and white colour scheme reminiscent of a wedding party massacre, and broadly speaking the same plot, just with a new cast of secondary characters and all the relationships muddled around a bit. Oh look, a cocky new partner whom we initially dislike. Circle correct answer. We will A, gradually gain mutual respect as we learn to work together, or B, turn into pirate flamingos and mount a voyage to the Caspian Sea. Anyway, if you need getting up to speed, Mirror's Edge is set in an oppressive worker-exploiting corporate future world, and it's published by EA. Relatedly, an underground network of couriers undermine the corporate stranglehold via an off-the-grid delivery service, and we play one such courier named Faith, whose sexual partners probably have a good laugh when they get together. Do you have faith? Yes, I'm having faith as we speak. I used to have faith, but I got disillusioned after I got my results back from the clinic. But I suppose someone thought it would be hard to justify putting all this work into armor designs and the prerequisite pre-animated takedowns if it's all just going to be streaking past like the end of 2001. So every now and again they lock you in a room for a few rounds with the goon squad, and what do you know? It turns out that a skinny unarmed girl with a reduced perception of her surroundings that inevitably comes from a first-person perspective will probably get passed around like a plate of canapes. What an informative science experiment this has been. Here is a joke that I just made up. What's the difference between E3 and a pen full of excited pigs fighting over the stinking corpse of a sheep? Microphones! The Wii U's finally getting that fucking Zelda game you want so much, although it is going to have to share it with the NX, which at this point could be anything from an upgraded Wii U to a dancing bear in a fez. Kojima Productions announced something called Death Stranding, with the emphasis on thing, let's charitably call it a proof of concept, which proves very little except that Kojima shouldn't watch so many music videos. And then there's Resident Evil 7, which has boldly leapt into Silent Hill's smoking shoes with a new and yet hauntingly familiar playable teaser in a first-person spooky house. A style shift worked wonders for Resident Evil 4, but this is a shift so radical that even calling it Resident Evil borders on duplicitous, except for the fact that the game is now literally about an evil residence. Still, what else could they do? Follow on from Resident Evil 6? That'd be like trying to serve dessert after the main course consisted of fillet of asbestos in dog shit. Getting back to the subject of VR, I still think it's a way forward, but the push towards it is starting to remind me of the push towards motion controls, and that makes me uneasy, like my preferred political candidate got endorsed by Hitler. Anyway, that Star Trek Bridge Operations game intrigued me, in a slightly shameful dad's train set sort of way. But of all the generations of Star Trek we could pretend to be in, we're stuck with Reboot Trek? That's like inviting the Spice Girls to an orgy and only Sporty Spice shows up. All I could think about as I watched him slowly trudge through pretty environments having Sony-branded character-building moments and being a bad dad was the start of the original God of War, in which Kratos was in a room full of monsters, yelled, "Monsters are a thing that I kill," and that was it, straight into gameplay to start bouncing them around like kittens in a candy floss machine. These first 5 minutes of gameplay videos don't count for a whole lot if those 5 minutes are wholly unrepresentative of the rest of the game. I mean, we all know damn well that kid's not going to survive past the second act, because it wouldn't be a God of War game if Kratos wasn't using deicide as impromptu bereavement counselling. But Quake Champions seems to have bugger all to do with the original Quake, and bugger lots to do with Overwatch being more successful than the MMR vaccine. If they keep this up, then soon we'll enter a world where names are totally fucking meaningless, which will come as a relief to my friend, Patrick Childmolester. And my goodness, this game seems to have pissed in a lot of people's hand sanitizer. The word mismanaged has been floating around a lot, but then this is the rule more than the exception with popular kickstarted projects. Say what you like about big publishers, but at least their drones have to demonstrate a degree of professionalism before they can donate their souls to the mothership, whereas the only guarantee with a kickstarted project is that lots of people want it, or at least claim to want it. In my experience, most people don't really know what they want. A lot of people said they wanted Britain to leave the EU, but were quickly rethinking their position after the country was taken over by a character from Sesame Street, and the value of the pound dropped like a Conservative Prime Minister's trousers at a pig farm. I still say that no game these days has any excuse for having a live system, because I place a clear distinction between a game that supplies an enjoyable meaty challenge and one that merely fucks the player about, and forcing me to restart the whole level from scratch because I died 3 times to an unreasonable pixel-perfect instant death jump to which I was given 12 nanoseconds to react very firmly pitches its tent in the fucking me about camp. I suppose the dialogue's pretty annoying and just refuses to go away like an obnoxious uncle who came over for the holidays and is still there on January 3rd fucking the family dog. All in all, I felt very little motivation to continue playing when I could have been doing the laundry or waxing my arsehole, but I still don't think it's that atrocious a game, just not as rewarding as ripping the hairs out of my taint, and frankly few things are. So let's take a look inside. Sorry, I meant to say, let's take a look at Inside. And that's going straight onto my list of game titles that are needlessly awkward to Google, alongside Fuse and Wet and Dead or Alive Extreme 3, which is very awkward to Google if your girlfriend ever looks at your search history. But it's the last few minutes that most dominate my thinking when I go over Thatcher's Britain in my head, when the game takes the last exit to Bonkersburg. I very much don't want to spoil anything, but if you've ever fallen asleep while watching Children of Men and had that dream where you're being chased down a hallway by your father's disembodied testicles, it might seem weirdly familiar. A long journey unexpectedly turns into a few minutes of chaos and horror, and abruptly stops in a way that feels simultaneously relieving and anticlimactic. It's like watching the never-ending story up to one of the scary bits and then shooting yourself in the head. What's the word for this strange feeling inside me, this cozy feeling of warmth and familiarity that makes me feel like I'm in precisely the place where I'm most comfortable? Oh, I remember. Hatred. Have you characters, Technomancer? You bet your bollocks we've got characters, party members and quest givers every colour of the miserable bastard rainbow, with struggles and adversities you will invest in like a dot-com startup in the late 90s. Have you built us a world, Technomancer? You gamble your gonads we've built a world, a dark and complex cyberpunk world in which factions battle for supremacy against the backdrop of post-colonization Mars, and there are only shades of grey. I ain't disputing that last part, Technomancer, but probably not in the way you intended. Now have you combat? You wager your wobbly bits we've got combat. Exciting real-time combat with enough variety of weapons and skills to create a staggering staggering number of alternative playstyles. What number's that, Technomancer? 3. There's 3 playstyles. That is quite a staggering number. Alright, I'm down. Why don't you start by telling me the main character's overall goal? Oh, bugger, I knew we forgot something. Any game in which you start as a member of a sinister authority who interacts with poor people and suspiciously attractive revolutionaries will almost certainly contrive you to be no longer a member of the sinister authority before the second act, with the exception of modern warfare shooters, where you usually stay in the sinister authority and French kiss assault rifles for 6 hours. The challenge comes from a mixture of pattern memorization, accuracy, and pure reflexes, but with varying amounts of each from boss to boss, which rather keeps things interesting. It also means that the difficulty curve is all over the fucking place, and more resembles a line graph showing my level of emotion during an average episode of Flipper. It's the story of a little girl who lives a simple life with her fisherman father, but when he fails to return from the sea one day, she builds a submarine. Okay, I'm not going to let you gloss over that song of the day. How does a prepubescent girl whose education consists of reading the labels on the back of her dad's whiskey bottles construct a functioning deep submergence vehicle? It's not like a boxcar derby, you silly moo. But cast your eye on the developer. Yes, it's Insomniac Games. Ratchet & Clank, Resistance, Sunset Bloody Overdrive. What's a AAA developer doing making 2D small child scary world games? This isn't Secret Millionaire. And that's what's really condescending, that they thought they'd come down from on high to show the indies how it's done and made something so insultingly generic. Stick to the likes of Sunset Overdrive, lads. It's easy to stick to because it's covered in shit. I am Setsuna in my lucrative side venture as a transvestite cam whore, but by strange coincidence, I am Setsuna is also the name of a game that came out last week. It's a JRPG, because with a title like that, of course it was going to be either a JRPG or a visual novel about an innocent young schoolmate and all the ways you can fuck her on a subway train. Sadly, I Am Setsuna hasn't taken inspiration from any part of Chrono Trigger that mattered, such as the unique characters, imaginative plot that develops in interesting ways or variety of environments with more than 2 colours, and merely recreates the combat and party mechanics somewhat faithfully, which is like claiming that your movie is inspired by Apocalypse Now because you also recorded it on film and employed sound engineers and pointed your camera at a fat bloke for 10 minutes. You know what? I almost felt bad about complaining that the entire game is one big ice level. Not every game has to be a fucking sightseeing tour, and maybe it wanted to focus on something else, until I was looking for tips for a certain boss and realised I had no idea what to fucking Google. Ice Caves boss? That narrows it down to roughly all of them. Besides, if the game was focusing on something else, what the fuck could it have been? The emotional impact of Setsuna's tragic inspirational story? I got more emotional parting ways with my fucking yeast infection. Gameplay is like a jar of peanut butter. It might be fun to stick your knob in, but kindly wait till after I've made the sandwiches. Yahtzee, please come out of the fridge. Has a big release come out? No. Did you bring me more lager? No. Well then, piss off! Christ, I hate summer. All no games and nice weather and reasons to go outside. A few weeks back, the developers of the excellent Wolfenstein New Order marked the 20th anniversary of Quake 1 by releasing a free new level pack for the original game, which cemented my respect for that company because this is a gesture rooted in actual passion for gaming. Passion, muses the AAA games industry collectively. What's fruit got to do with anything? Oh, hang on, passion. I remember that. That's that thing I pretend to have during E3 and while I'm inside my wife's dry, joyless cunt. Quake represents PC games maturing out of the in-jokey fucking about and into awkward angsty pubescence for better or worse. Later it would go off to college in Half-Life, join the military for Call of Duty, and get all its arms and legs blown off in time for Gears of War. Games with a theoretically infinite amount of content are all very well, but I don't think the developers ever consider what the fuck we're supposed to do with it all. I mean, my kitchen sink can produce a theoretically infinite amount of water, but once I've stopped being thirsty and I'm as clean as I'm ever going to get, and cooked all my spaghetti and filled all the condoms I intend to throw at the bailiffs, then what am I supposed to do with the rest of the stuff? Besides that, there's also a laundry list of developmental milestones to reach, most of which are breathtakingly inane, and I could really do without the fucking awards ceremony every single time you get one. Congratulations, you have scratched your ass 20,000 times. Here's a prolonged jingle while this text selfishly hogs the interface for 30 seconds so you can't interact with anything. Congratulations, you have contracted radiation poisoning from a planet's toxic atmosphere. Here's another congratulations, you have died a total of 100 times from radiation poisoning while inches from safety because you can't get inside your ship while I'm telling you about all the milestones you've achieved. Does the name Spore ring a bell? Remember what a big thing that was supposed to be before its big idea for galaxy-spanning gameplay turned out to be a bunch of little ideas strung together, none strong enough to sustain interest. You know what they say, he who forgets the past is condemned to resit history A-level. It's actually rather clever what they've done with the titles. Not the grow-go pun in Grow Home, Christ no, that's the play on words equivalent of wearing Comic Sans on a t-shirt. Grow Home was about the childlike desire to return to mother after a long day rolling around in dirt molesting small animals, and shelter beneath the warm familiar glow she gets when she's been drinking red wine since noon. Grow Up, contrarily, is about having to mature and learn self-reliance when our mother unexpectedly explodes and her pieces are scattered across the backyard. Yeah, I've been there, Grow Up. That was a weird conversation with the gardeners. Fans have learned to love his incredible strength of character that compels him to always do the right thing, or to always do the wrong thing, or to go back and forth between doing the right thing and the wrong thing, depending on his mood, his remaining stun gun ammo, and whether or not there are any vending machines to throw at people. Because this is a Deus Ex game, and you know what that means. Choice and consequences, cautionary cyberpunk near futures infused with relevant societal issues of the day, and a protagonist who'd get cut out of a Matrix sequel for taking themselves way too fucking seriously. Well, apparently Apparently after the end of the last game, and incidentally the game couldn't give 2 squirts of motor oil infused spunk which button you pressed on the ending Tron 3000, and I suspected it couldn't at the time either, Adam spent some time in a coma clinic and someone implanted a fresh batch of Game & Watch handhelds into his buttocks. Blimey, Adam better hope he never goes to robot prison. There seems to be something about his bum that makes people want to stuff it full of hardware every time he goes to sleep. Want the ability to mark 5 targets? Not really, since I can see them all on the radar anyway, and marking them requires me to pop up from cover and gormlessly stare at them for a second like they're my high school crush and I'm hiding in their dad's rose bushes. Well then, how about the ability to mark 40 targets? There's nowhere in the game where there are that many, but it'll come in handy after you get bored and switch to playing Serious Sam instead. Nintendo fans, don't you see that this isn't healthy? Remember when Nintendo abandoned you on the highway because it thought it had a good thing going with the casual gaming audience and you had to hitch a ride home in the back of a dog catcher's van? No, they apologised for that. And it was my fault anyway. I should have liked Wii Music more. Things have reached a new low with Metroid Prime Federation Force. It's not just not catering to the fans anymore, now it's going out of its way to finally break their spirit once and for all. It's like Nintendo promised to buy them a puppy and they came downstairs on Christmas morning to find a load of Korean takeout containers under the tree. I can tell you that it's not because they didn't want to include Samus Aran, because she constantly shows up in dialogues and mission briefings. It's like the game's holding her over you like a cruel dog owner whose closed hand might not even contain a biscuit at all. Samus Aran just showed up and told us about another pirate base. Shame that you missed her. She's so cool and stoic with cracking tits. She also brought us some homemade fudge, but we ate it all before you got here. The story is there are 3 planets, the ice world, the desert world, and the world that also turned up, and the Federation are tasked to go there and murder wildlife until the space pirates appear, which we know for absolute fact will happen because at the start the commander type bloke goes, "Don't worry, there's no way the space pirates will show up," rather than each planet having a big interconnected world to explore like it was some kind of fucking Metroid game. It's entirely mission based and we get dropped into small collections of rooms to complete single objectives. Metroid Prime was the game that successfully translated the atmosphere and feel of Metroid to a 3D first-person format, but Nintendo seems to have treated it like the red-headed stepchild ever since. First the sequels were kinda shit, then it's officially declared non-canon in favour of Other M, which is like taking away your child's Christmas present so that the cat can choke to death on it, and now this. Oh, stop comparing it to the Metroid you wanted it to be, Yahtzee. Can't you just accept that Nintendo wanted a new direction and made something a bit more family-friendly? After all, they've only got like 90 billion other franchises that do that. Well then, why did they even call it Metroid Prime? Except to deliberately fuck with Metroid Prime fans. They could easily have chucked Samus Aran in the airlock and more honestly called it Interstellar Midget Footballers, or Tangential Metroid Universe Thing starring the cast of Willow, or Don't Buy This Game, It's Shit. You play one of a selection of real-life Victorian figures, and incidentally I've learned to be slightly wary of any game in which Nikola Tesla is a character, the patron saint of socially awkward tech nerds, as they compete with their peers to map out unexplored lands and loot the place. And I did find it slightly hilarious that one of the playable characters is H.P. Lovecraft. That dude never left the house and thought Jews and black people evolved from jumping spiders and dog turds, so casting him as an explorer is like casting 50 Cent as Miss Marple. Well, this is a bit of suspicious serendipity on Microsoft's part. Out we staggered from Metroid Prime Federation Force's bring your own self-flagellation device barbecue, when Microsoft sidled up and whispered, "Hey, you like Metroid Prime?" And after we'd all finished weeping and rending our garments, it continued, "Well, we've got a game that takes influence from Metroid Prime and was directed by the same bloke who directed Metroid Prime. Ooh. And he also worked on PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Ooh. And it's only available on Xbox One." What did you say, Microsoft? I said it's only available for Windows 10. That's what I thought you said. It did, however, initially refuse to start until I closed down Steam. Oh, Microsoft, there's no need to be petty. Don't be so insecure. I'm sure there are plenty of features the Microsoft Store offers that Steam doesn't, and I'm sure I could even think of one given a team of researchers and a month. Once it runs out of dungeons, you go to the final confrontation at Fort Climax, fight a final boss, and then a fucking stop sign pops up and smashes you in the face like a comedy rake. Find 20 of the magic testicles to proceed. So I tuck my Climax blue balls back inside my trousers and go back to the overworld to meet my quota, come back, get to do another load of climactic challenges before the stop sign pops up again, piss off and dig up another 5 Easter eggs to continue. Fucking hell, whatever exciting climax is waiting at the top of this tower, I hope it's got a fucking book to read. You're just trying to draw your playtime out, aren't you, Recore? No. I'm not. On the whole, Recore is very flawed. Better than Federation Force, but then so is getting your Nadgers pinned to the ground by a filing cabinet full of unflattering school reports.
Let's all laugh at an industry that never learns anything, tee-hee-hee.
Yeah, you didn't think you'd hear that again, did you? Today, the Zero Punctuation Occasional Guide to Differently Able Moments in Gaming History examines the curious case of the Capcom 5. Not quite as many as the Magnificent 7, but remade about as much. But all seemed forgiven as Capcom announced in late 2002 5 new titles to revitalize the GameCube. PN03, Dead Phoenix, Beautiful Joe, Killer 7, and most notably the aforementioned Resident Evil 4, all to be overseen by proven director Shinji Mikami. Things were looking immediately rosier for Nintendo as a representative of Capcom USA claimed that these would all be exclusive to GameCube as he adjusted his Stetson and fired his revolvers into the air. But then the fiasco began as there were a few moments of angry muttering behind the curtains and Capcom USA came back out to say there'd been a communication cock-up and only Resident Evil 4 was confirmed to be exclusive at that time. Now, us mighty spacemen of the future year 2016 can look back on that with a knowing smile because at time of writing Resident Evil 4 has been ported ported to 11 different gaming platforms and at least one kitchen appliance, because it is, in academic terms, fucking sweet. I won't say Resident Evil 4 breathed new life into its franchise, because to even associate it with the other Resident Evils is like adding David Bowie to the lineup of S Club 7. Maybe everything would have still been lovely for Nintendo if Capcom had kept their mouths shut and hadn't announced the PS2 port 2 months before the GameCube release. Consequently, Resident Evil 4 sold 1.6 million on the GameCube and 2 million on the PS2. What should have been the laying down of a winning hand became the laying of a cruel fist upon the ghoulies. And one of the 5 was never even released. Dead Phoenix was supposed to be some Panzer Dragoon affair, but was cancelled in August 2003, which must have been an easy time to be a video game website headline writer. Dead Phoenix is dead. Bam! That deserves an early lunch. The final game was PN03, a third-person shooter about a lady who dressed like a MacBook trying to disguise itself as a kitchen appliance and constantly moved like she was busting for a piss. Critics and audiences panned it alike, and so naturally it was the only one of the 5 to remain a GameCube exclusive. Here's your consolation prize, Nintendo. It's a bag of lawn clippings and dead wasps. It's a first-person game where you are a dude or a dudette or a walrus or whatever you'd care to imagine, with the ability to accelerate to a speed somewhere in the region of the clappers, and your job is to get to the exit of each level without touching the ground. As the only things you're allowed to touch are a large number of trucks moving vaguely in the direction you're heading. There's not much in the way of story to give that context, but it reminds me of a game I used to play when I was a kid. And bear with me, because I know this sounds pretty crazy, when I'd pretend that the floor, right, was made out of lava, of all things, and would kill me if I stepped on it. I know, I was such a kooky random little bastard back in the day. I'm surprised my parents didn't lock me in a straitjacket and have me sectioned a lot earlier than they actually did. I find myself wondering if Paper Mario Sticker Star did alright. Not by my standards, and I know I sometimes give this impression that a game would have to escape from cold dits and fall to its knees at my door to commence a blowjob marathon that makes my feet recede into my legs to impress me, but Sticker Star was a particular thorn in my suppository because the older Paper Mario games had humour and life and creativity, whereas Sticker Star has, well, it has stickers. Nope, there it is on Wikipedia. Sticker Star, mixed reviews and the lowest scores of any Paper Mario game. Well, that clears it up. Now I understand perfectly why Nintendo thought, yes, this is the one we need to bring to Wii U. This is exactly what our ailing brand needs, a good hard shot of mediocrity that will pull our bootstraps about halfway up before getting bored and wandering off. And after restoring the first of the inevitable star-shaped things, it's parked its pointy bum down for less than a second before Princess Peach gets kidnapped, which I wouldn't have minded, but then a nearby Toad comments, "Oh no, Bowser kidnapped Princess Peach. What a totally unexpected happenstance." And you know what? Fuck you, Paper Mario Color Splash. There is a difference between clever subversive self-parody and just doing the same thing you always do but sarcastically rolling your eyes at it. Don't kick me in the bollocks and say, gosh, wouldn't it be funny if I were really kicking you in the bollocks. By now I'm sure the Nintendo fans are nervously chewing on their Triforce-shaped asthma inhalers trying to get a word in edgeways. Oh Yahtzee, stop giving us the same old shit about Nintendo not giving us the same old shit. So it isn't like the Paper Marios you used to like, so what? It's Nintendo's property and they can do what they like with it. Alright, granted, I might point out they keep slapping the Paper Mario name on it, but then this is the eternal paradox of Nintendo, isn't it? Exclusively makes games catered to the nostalgia crowd and yet goes out of their way to annoy them at the same time. But play it your way. I shall now stick this red hot wire coat hanger down my ear until I've forgotten about the good Paper Marios. There we go. Now, flurble blurble recidivist Mario cunt. In a normal RPG, annoying as it is when the game stops you every 10 steps to blow the random encounter trumpet, we take the consolation that every fight gives us a little experience and makes us a little bit stronger. In the Color Splash and Sticker Star system, however, getting caught by a random battle is totally disadvantageous. Cards are single use, so you might have to waste a 4 crikey death spooge on 2 one-legged special needs Goombas and a soggy biscuit. The only benefit you can get is money and expanded blood capacity, but virtually everything in the environment disgorges money and blood like a pole dancer with the Ebola virus. See, now that we've established that fun and original storytelling isn't part of Paper Mario's appeal, splurgle splurgle fuck mother hairy pipes, then fun gameplay is the only thing left it could possibly stand up on, but the combat is both disadvantageous to get into and not fun, which is not my idea of core gameplay, except in the sense of, core, this gameplay's shite. Mafia 3 takes the series' particular brand of GTA knockoff to the deep south in the era of the civil rights movement, where we play a young black crim named Lincoln Clay. Oh, for fuck's sake. Lincoln from Abraham Lincoln who freed the slaves, Clay from Cassius Clay, also known as Muhammad Ali. Nice. I know the race issue was going to be unavoidable in this plot, but you might as well have called him Jerome K. Blackperson. 2K certainly felt it was unavoidable because the game opens with a very Assassin's Creed-esque disclaimer to the effect of, a lot of people are going to be saying very horrible racist things in this game, but please understand we had to put all that in to accurately bring the era to life, and when you think about it, not putting it in would have been even more racist. Right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, nigger, 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 coon, coon, spick. I get that the 60s Deep South literally was more cartoonishly bigoted than a 2016 presidential candidate, but having granted themselves the all-clear to say the N-word, I suspect that the writers started slightly getting off on doing so. You don't exactly have to claw for every possible advantage when you're up against enemies that will keep coming over to check the mysterious whistling doorway with 7 or 8 dead henchmen scattered around it. By the end of the game, I was struggling to remember why we were supposed to hate the main bad guy. He killed about 0.01% of the people we've killed, and had been running a bunch of naughty crime rackets which we proceeded to take over and not change in any way, but he also had an overarching sinister diabolical scheme to set up a legitimate business, leave the criminal life behind, and create a future for his children. Oh, hang on, he does say nigger once or twice. Well, okay then, say no more. Let's drive his harmless old ass to suicide to show how much more more enlightened we are these days. You know what's funny? Sticking fish fingers up your nose and blowing raspberries to the Captain Pugwash theme tune. But you know what's funny about Gears of War? It's a series with a fairly respectable heritage about it, an early Xbox 360 game attached to the venerable Cliff Bleszinski, with focus on a grand architectural aesthetic and a solid core gameplay style that has had a lasting influence on shooter design to this day, and yet when you actually sit down and play one of them, you swiftly remember, oh that's right, these games are for absolute cretins. Maybe a Gears of War sequel being a sequel to Gears of War isn't exactly an automatic strike against, but even in his prime, Marcus Phoenix was a boring, grunty misery guts with one end broken off his emotional spectrum, so God knows why you'd think he'd liven up the new cast now that he's undergone no development except he's rocking a grey beard and a catheter bag. You know, I pause for a moment in any given shootout and I look at the sheer detail in the surrounding environment right down to the cobblestones in the floor, and I have to wonder, how does the artist who painted that cobblestone feel about all their hard work being part of something that passes through the mind so utterly inconsequentially? As the target audience trudges on to find another thing to shoot, ignoring a brief character moment to shove another handful of cheesy snacks down their orange-stained windpipes, I wonder if they ever dream of doing more artistically fulfilling work, like directing facial cum shots. Speaking for the spods then, the PlayStation VR helmet is comfortable enough to wear, with enough adjustability that I can find the sweet spot where my vision isn't blurred and the bridge of my nose doesn't hurt after a bare 30 to 40 minutes of fiddling, which puts it above average for commercial VR headsets, and then there I was inside the virtual world with a heavy thing hanging off my face like a tortoise was trying to mate with my cycling helmet, which doesn't help with the queasiness, but a big part of that is game design, and developers are continually finding new ways to mitigate the issue. Batman Arkham VR, for example, hits upon the clever notion of being such incredible garbage that you close the game in disgust before you have a chance to feel ill. 30 fucking bucks I paid for a half-hour CD-ROM virtual tour from the mid to late 90s. I'd have expected more if I found it on the cover of a fucking magazine. Regular viewers will know that I have a bit of a wasp in my urethra about illogical sequel numbering. Mainly I worry that after the apocalyptic global conflict that will accompany the new American presidency, the future scholars of gaming will be terribly confused. We found Battlefield 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1942, so by my count we're missing 1,938 episodes. But there is a slim justification for the titling of Battlefield 1. Firstly, it's sort of a play on words, Battlefield 1, you see. Congratulations, you have won a battlefield. Hope you like shell casings and entrails. And of course, it's a clever reference to the game being set in World War I, which in the run-up to release many pundits and players rightly thought could be just the kind of fresh thinking that would breathe new life into the genre. For one thing, it'll mean that battles will be taking place in literal fields, and the whole affair won't be infused by an inescapable air of dishonesty. And without the benefits of modern weaponry, the gameplay would call for a wholly different, more thoughtful approach to "What was that?" cries Battlefield 1. Sorry, we were busy giving automatic machine guns to every motherfucker on the planet. Oh. The third story is about Italian war heroes, and as one might reasonably expect is the shortest of the campaigns, Still, the multiplayer is where Battlefield 1 finally captures the true spirit of the First World War. Just imagine that every soldier whose life you briefly control and just as quickly squander had 6 months of training, a home to which they will never return, grieving parents, and perhaps a puppy sitting pining on the doormat making noises like this. You bastards! Tityfall 2 is, spoiler warning, the sequel to Tityfall 1. Basically the same, but with a single-player campaign now. But I hope it doesn't expect to score any points for that, because selling Tityfall 1 at full price without single-player was like forgetting to inflate the bouncy castle and resulted in about as much head trauma for me. Whereas Call of Duty Infi Winfi gives us the SDF, Mars-based military nation that despises the people of Earth because ... Their leader is played by Kit Harington, and after carefully analysing his performance in this game to ascertain his character's motivations, the only conclusion I had reached was that Kit Harington could be out-acted by a dying blobfish in a Kit Harington mask. Brian Twatchops teams up with a pilotless mech to form a vaudeville comedy act based around pulling the "I am oblivious to your human sarcasm" gag about 7 million times, but the AI comes to respect Brian's skills and their relationship actually means something by the end. Meanwhile, Impertinent Waffling also has an AI character who is exactly the same as everyone else, except he's got a traffic light for a head, and another character is really awkwardly and inexplicably racist at him for no better reason than so he can equally inexplicably stop being racist 2 missions later, which made me go, uh-oh, I smell hastily resolved character arc. Wouldn't start reading any long books, Mr. X-racist mate. So what happened to all that speckled guff about female characters in gaming? Seems like it wasn't that long ago that people kept going, more female protagonists! Female gamers need characters they can identify with and look up to, because it's not like themes of adversity and the human condition are fairly universal. No, I can only possibly relate to a character with whom I share some circumstantial physical characteristics, because I'm fucking psychotic. And then the developers said, well, okay then, and we better dress them up in outfits that show off those circumstantial physical characteristics as much as possible, since they're apparently so important. And that, if anything, made things worse. But you know, I totally agree with this sentiment. After all, I have to have a whiteboard marker on hand when I play Tomb Raider so that I can draw a little moustache and beard on Lara Croft and start giving a shit about her problems. But unless you let the player pick their gender, then you're going to have to alienate someone. We should thank Dishonored 2 then for doing just that and postponing the inevitable apocalyptic gender war for another week. I think I must have accidentally condemned the teleport power to 20 years in the Chateau d'If at some point, because its revenge was elaborate and well planned. You can trust me, I will totally teleport you safely onto that 5th floor window ledge across the street. Aha! Vengeance is mine! Have fun escaping those 97 police officers with your shin bones sticking out of your armpits, motherfucker. Ubisoft, serious question. question, are there any actual human beings making your decisions anymore? Your credit sequences are longer than an episode of Inspector Morse, so I know human beings are involved somewhere, in the same way that that cloud of smoke coming out of the concentration camp chimney probably involved human beings at one point. Our protagonist is Marcus Holloway, gifted young hacker who was wrongly sentenced to community service and decided that the most balanced, level-headed response would be to start gunning down police officers. To this end, he joins an underground hacktivist group consisting of 2 spectacular super spurgs, a fairly indistinct black dude to whom I immediately pointed and yelled, "That motherfucker's gonna die first," and a girl with a middlingly brown skin tone, cornrows on one side of her head and a white girl hairdo on the other, who I can only assume was an attempt to fill the entire diversity quota with a single character. Hey, let's hack into my niece's stream and humiliate her live, to show her how bad it would be if some nasty person hacked into her stream and humiliated her live, goes the premise of one side mission. It'd have been nice if the plot had had a self-reflective arc, and so long as I'm fantasizing, it would also have been nice if there had been a plot at all. Saying Final Fantasy is for girls would be a terribly regressive statement, but I can't help noticing that in Final Fantasy 15, our typically androgynously handsome young prince's quest is to marry his sweetie pie in a fairy tale wedding, and in order to do this, he must join a boy band and get through several months of cohabitation without sucking a single one of their dicks. Anyway, the Happy Town Snuggle Club invade our homeland, and Noctis must journey around the world building his powers until he can take the fight to them, alongside his 3 constant companions, Gladiolus, a beefy mullet head who was doing crunches when everyone else was learning how to do up shirt buttons, Ignis, the smart one who looks like Travis Touchdown's more successful cousin, who always sarcastically asks him if he's gotten a real job yet at family get-togethers, and Prompto, a 14-year-old girl in a miniskirt who's probably only here because the other 3 needed something warm to park their Todgers in on wintry nights. I definitely played 15 for longer than most modern Final Fantasies, but in the end just as decisively drew a line under playing any further because the combat had shifted from fun size annoyance to medium and was showing no sign of reversing that trend. But what really clinched it was a side quest introduced some ways into the game when the girl, who had muscled her way into a vague love interest position with no input or encouragement from me whatsoever, suggested I use a nearby plot to grow carrots. And all at once the spell broke. I realised if the game was throwing inane bullshit like carrot farming at me 20 hours in, then it was probably going to be inane bullshit all the way down. This is of course assuming she was being literal and wasn't making some subtle come-on along the lines of plant your big root vegetable all up in my window box. The Last Guardian was announced 9 tongue-spunking years ago. An entire tonsil-jizzing generation of consoles has passed between it and its predecessor Shadow of the Colossus, and I'm pleased to report that The Last Guardian is disappointing right out of the gate as it turns out that the title doesn't mean anything. The setup is, we are a small boy who wakes up in a gigantic ruined castle, covered in strange tattoos and lying next to a colossal hairy monster. Obligatory, yeah, I've had mornings like that, joke. I must say at this point that the developers should be congratulated on what a superb job they did at making the giant sparrow hamster act convincingly like a real animal. It moves exactly like a cat, and it stares blankly at you like a family dog trying to passive-aggressively protest the amount of Christmas dinner going into you and not him. But I'd say the emphasis is on cat, because you have about as much direct control over Fuzzy Chops as you do on a bar of soap in the bath. You start the game with the ability to call him to your location, which is slightly redundant since he usually follows you anyway because he's still mulling over whether to play along or bite your chitlins off. Later on, your relationship improves and you can actually start giving him commands such as jump or go vaguely in that direction, or look around at precisely the moment I attempt to leap off your head onto a ledge. Oh, sorry, my mistake, that's not a command, he does that one for free. I was this close to quitting in frustration after I lost half an hour trying to figure out how to make Bonzo dive into a pool and swim through an underwater tunnel. I'm sorry, game, I can't seem to find the button for the dive down and swim through tunnel command. Perhaps it lies between the buttons for whap with rolled up newspaper and administer worming tablet on the controller that doesn't exist. Fluffy Wuff Barkington III felt more like part of the hazards, something we needed to work around rather than with. It'd be like getting invested in the relationship between the bloke from Shenmue and the bloke from Shenmue's forklift. Imagine that, the storybook romance between a cold piece of emotionless machinery and a forklift.
What a year it's been. Explosive elections, more celebrity deaths than a terrorist bombing at a drug rehab clinic, and a slew of game releases that ran the entire spectrum of awful, bland, and grudgingly okay. I suppose the fact that the very first game I reviewed went straight into the bottom 5 should have been read as a bad omen for the year, more so than that fucking gorilla anyway. Devil's Third was monumentally stupid and apparently designed by a schizophrenic with vibrators for thumbs, but it shall only skate at the edges of the bottom 5 for at least being weird enough to briefly distract one from, say, a recent bereavement or loss of limb. Fourth worst is the first of 2 entries today that I like to collectively call Nintendo's prolonged public suicide. But you know, I've slightly mellowed to Metroid Prime Federation Force of late. They just wanted to try something new, right? Make a game that isn't atmospheric like Metroid Prime, explorative like Metroid Prime, or helmed by the strong protagonist of Metroid Prime, but call it Metroid Prime anyway. That's innovative, I suppose, in the sense that the Atomic Bomb had some innovative ideas about civic restructuring. An interesting loophole in my no lazy sequels to games I already like rule is that it doesn't apply to blatant rip-offs of games I already like, especially if it's a bit better than the game I already like. I'm talking about Stardew Valley. It's all the mind-numbing workaday, let's tentatively call it fun, of Harvest Moon, but bigger and on Steam. There's never been a better time to stand behind a cow and make highly suspicious thrusting motions. The second Nintendo game on the list only made it to third blandest, as the worst games list requires that I get at least slightly worked up, and the donut of my interest in Paper Mario games can only get heartlessly stamped on once or twice before all the jam has been squirted out. That's what you are, Paper Mario Color Splash. You are the last pathetic dribble that oozes from my once squirty donut. VR is still in its experimental phase, and like CD-ROMs in the 90s, that means breaking new ground in terribleness. And CD-ROMs didn't make you physically ill unless you wired the spinning mechanism to your chair by mistake. But Batman Arkham VR is a rare kind of terrible, even disregarding that. $30 for a Batman experience equivalent to gluing Batman comic panels to your spectacles and locking yourself in a Portaloo. So let's give Doom the best game trophy and give myself the England cricket team award for totally unsurprising results. But it was a generally shitty year, as George Michael fans will attest, and I'm not as enthused about Doom as I was with Undertale. I couldn't see myself sulkily ending a friendship with someone because they weren't moved to tears when the Doom Marine snapped off the Cyberdemon's left horn and shoved it up his icon of sin. Oh, how the internal debate raged as to whether this belonged in the worst or blandest list, but in the end, no passionate hatred can be sustained for a game in which you can spend 10 minutes pruning a giant pillar of rock with your colourful piss stream and not be entirely sure of how you profited from the venture. No Man's Sky, more like no game. That wasn't your strongest attempt at wordplay, Yachts. No worries, I'll just patch something better in later. But it takes something special to top the worst games list. Bugs, bad design, and awful story are but single ineptitudes. When the game was obviously a bad idea at the concept stage, its eventual release requires a perfect sequence of bad decisions, or what physicists call a cock-up cascade. Homefront the Revolution started with the idea of making a sequel to a wish fulfillment for assholes modern shooter, and the resultant cock-up cascade was like watching a chihuahua in a dog wheelchair trying to descend a spiral staircase.